All right, thank you guys all for joining us here on in the middle of August, in the dead of August, when people are traveling all over, especially in this city. We have a full room, so I'm pretty pleased with that. Thank you guys for joining us today. So my name is Ross Noderft. I'm the Executive Director of the Alliance for Digital Innovation. This is the second of a two-part series discussing FedRAMP and the future of FedRAMP, how FedRAMP is evolving. Alliance for Digital Innovation, for those of you who don't know, and for the folks who are online, we are a group of folks that companies that support and work with the government. We are highly focused on public sector. We are commercial cloud-based technologies. We are people who support commercial cloud-based technologies, and we are here to partner with and remove we are here to partner with and work with government to access the latest and greatest commercial technology out there. You would have thought this was my first time doing it. So we have a packed program today. The first one was a tight 90 minutes. This one we decided to take a little bit longer and have a few more discussions. So since our last meeting, we had a policy that came out, so congratulations to OMB for getting that out the door. Now the hard part of implementing is underway, so we're hoping to have a discussion to hear from government as well as industry on how that's impacting them, what they think the evolution looks like, and I'm looking forward to hearing from all the different panelists. But to kick us off, we are lucky to have with us Claire Martirana. She is the federal CIO, so the U.S. government's Chief Information Officer, which is a pretty big job, especially these days as we move more and more into a digital environment. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Claire up here to say a few words and kick us off. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Russ, and hi, everybody. Great to see you all, and hi to everybody online. So really excited to join this ADI event, and thank you for hosting this two-part series. This is really important to us. So we've made some really significant strides over the past few years to bolster FedRAMP's role as the cornerstone of federal cloud security. As you all are probably aware, we have completed the FedRAMP Authorization Act, OMB's modernizing FedRAMP policy, one of our favorites, M2415, and GSA has released the program's 2-year vision roadmap. So since 2011, obviously, in the 13 years, cloud has evolved pretty dramatically and is a cornerstone for the way that we are currently operating our modern systems. FedRAMP is a very high priority for us. I've told a few people as we were convening that when I was first announced in this job, the first 3 pieces of incoming that I got were all about FedRAMP. Please fix it, please modernize it, please accelerate it, please do everything that you can, because it's really hindering our ability to modernize across government. So we've really tried to meet that moment over the Biden-Harris administration and really continue to focus on this. So FedRAMP has a strong value proposition, as you all know. It empowers agencies to use modern cloud technologies, acting as a mission enabler with an emphasis on security and protection of federal information. So I'll give you a couple of my favorite FedRAMP stories, just because I think that they bring to light some of the incredible missions that we're supporting across government and why this work is so absolutely critical. We're accelerating the pace of scientific discovery in cancer research. If you've all been following, the president was just down in Louisiana focusing on the cancer moonshot, but the National Cancer Institute has been using cloud-based bioinformatics platform to design specifically for cancer researchers. And what it's doing is they have an enormous volume of data. The platform is allowing them to store, analyze, and share cancer research among a global community, accelerating cancer research. It is really critical to National Cancer Institute's mission. We're also, another wonderful example is supporting seamless and uninterrupted care for veterans at the Department of Veterans Affairs. The platform is allowing them to provide uninterrupted support for veterans in their care, mission critical. And the third, I am a bit of a healthcare nerd, so that's why you'll see a few healthcare examples here. Improving public health outcomes. HHS has been using a cloud-based platform for tracking, analyzing, and storing biological data to address our nation's biggest health challenges. The platform serves as a centralization hub, again, similar to NIH, also allowing researchers to securely share and collaborate on data sets, fostering an incredibly rich research environment. So that is some of the mission areas that are so absolutely critical to us. But I have a really firm belief, having been a federal CIO, that we spend too much time on the ATO process in general. Within agencies, it's burdensome. And every time that we focus on trying to accelerate delivery in an agency, we oftentimes stumble upon much of our bureaucratic internal challenges. And that is where FedRAMP's do once, use many approach really promotes the reuse of standardized security assessments to save agencies time and resources. There have been challenges along the way, as you all know, and the team in the Office of the Federal CIO has spent a lot of time. I just have to say, hats off to Drew Michaelgard, the Deputy Federal Chief Information Officer, Eric Mill, who is now at GSA running this program as Executive Director, but Eric spent time in OFCIO as well. All really recognizing the urgency of this need and the need for us to rise to the occasion. So I just wanted to say thank you to Drew, Eric, Chris DeRusha, former member of the team, and many people in our office who have spent countless hours not only doing this work to get us here, but also continuing to do the work so that we can drive adoption across agencies. So doing things like roadshows that they'll talk about to really help our agency partners understand the evolution of this program and move forward. So our future vision for FedRAMP reflects on our commitment to three key priorities: strengthening security and risk management, improving customer experience, and reducing time and cost through automation. So a little bit, as you might have heard from previous things that we've talked about related to FedRAMP, FedRAMP needs to be a security program, not a compliance program. It is mission critical that we focus on security. The second is making sure that we focus on the customer experience. So we've working with GSA, they've implemented a new program governance model, established formal feedback loops with industry and agency practitioners and experts through the Federal Secure Cloud Advisory Committee and the Technical Advisory Group to ensure that we're collecting the voice of the customer in everything that we do. FedRAMP is also proactively seeking inputs from these groups and the public through public comment. We have been focused, again, through the Biden-Harris administration on making sure that we are doing human-centered policy design, that we are talking to the customers of all of our services to make sure that we are incorporating their feedback directly into the policies that we are writing. So the public comment process will inform further guidance from the program related to the important security areas in program governance, such as cryptography and program metrics. And for those of you here and online, the comment periods are still open right now. So finally, efficiency, right? We're really leveraging up on automation to accelerate the authorization process, to make sure that we can move quickly. An example is we had a significant change request process that has been really cumbersome in the past. And the FedRAMP team is conducting agile delivery pilots, which empowers cloud providers to continuously deliver assets and improvements using secure and agile delivery and deployment practices. This will allow agencies to leverage the latest security features and services while removing roadblocks for CSPs to bring these features to market. Really important part of this. We are also trying to shift from manual to digital authorization packages once we have security packages and continuous monitoring on data in machine readable formats, with the FedRAMP automation platform in place, we can analyze the data, and this should help us more rapidly detect and respond to real-world threats. So these changes are just part of the journey that we've been going on. We've been building this from cloud first to cloud smart to continuing to make sure that we're building on the work that has gone on before this moment in time. But we are really focused on making sure that cloud technology is agile, secure, and responsive to public needs, and that we at federal agencies are capable of utilizing these incredible products across our ecosystem. So the innovative solutions combined with our commitment to security and compliance can usher in a new era of digital government. We're not just updating process, we're laying the groundwork for a technological revolution in service delivery to the public. So happy to be working together with all of you for a more secure, public-centric government that works smarter in the 21st century. So thank you so much for coming today. Thanks of you for tuning in online, and really looking forward to the panel conversations. Thanks.
That was great. Thank you for kicking us off, Claire. We really appreciate it. So next up, we're going to hear from Drew Michaelgard and Eric Mill. So if you guys can come up to the stage, and while they're doing that, I'll give you guys some heads up and rules of the road. First of all, make sure those mics are on at the table. So when you sit, just make sure they're close enough so you can speak. And that goes for the rest of the panels as well. You all have microphones on the table. If there is time for audience questions, you'll have to turn those on. So just a heads up. And then folks online, we should have an open Q&A. Feel free to drop some questions in there. I know we've got a good number of folks online today. So, but with that, we'll get started with the panel.
Absolutely.
I'm going to pin you in so you can't escape.
I appreciate that.
All right, guys. So I know Claire referenced your work on the policy memo, but I think it's just good to level set with kind of who you are, what you do. I know we've talked about this before, but if we start with just kind of give your role in the organization.
Yeah, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for all coming here today. It is August, so I know this isn't always like your number one place to be. And also thanks for everybody online. Name's Drew Michaelgard. I'm the Deputy Federal CIO at OMB, so Office of Management and Budget. We do oversight and policy of all federal systems.
Hi, Eric Mill, title is Executive Director for Cloud Strategy. So that has me in the leadership of the Technology Transformation Services wing of GSA, where, as I think folks mentioned, about 90% of my time is focused on FedRAMP and what we're doing here today, and a little smattering of other things as they come up.
Great. All right, so it's been about a month since the policy hit the streets. And we, starting off easy, what's the reception been like as what have you been hearing from folks?
So, and you mentioned it earlier, and you've worked in our office, like both the challenges of getting policy out, and of course you think you write it perfectly. And then the implementation of it is really where you want to lean in with the agencies, help enable them to implement and move the federal government in the way that the administration wants to move. So we have, in doing that, we've gone out and done a number of road shows, and the feedback has been really positive. But at the same time, each agency is at a different place in maturity. So we hear different things from different agencies, like where we need to be meeting them as far as the policy goes out, and not just the policy, but how we follow that up with budget, oversight. And then we can do a lot of things outside of direct policy to enable them to help achieve their missions, providing oversight, top cover. And so it's been overall, I know I answered that probably a little bit too much, but it's been really helpful to hear from the agencies how close we were in some areas, and then what other tools they need to be successful.
Yeah, I've been working with on OMB policies and around OMB stuff for maybe a decade, obviously including my time that I actually spent at OMB. And I've seen a lot of different policies. I've worked on ones that have not worked out as well as the authors hoped. And, a few years goes by and you sort of forget that it exists. And I've worked on memos that have left the government very different than before it was issued. And the difference between those two things is follow through. And one of the things we've been really advantaged to have in this situation is we have been working on the follow through in advance for the entire year right now in 2024. And I think, it's not the first time that OMB, for example, has done a public comment period and then followed up with a final. But one of the things that's extra special, I think, about this opportunity is that in between those two things, we've had the opportunity to start putting some of those things into practice, really, and validating the theory, seeing how they work, feeling what is getting traction, and actually generating the support, infrastructure, and energy in the operating arm to do these things, which I hope has been coming across this year. So, I think that the follow through is what we're focused on, and I think that's been helping the rollout quite a bit.
And I know you were going to give us some freedom to ask questions. Eric and I have worked together very closely, late into the night, most nights writing this policy, and yet I don't know a lot of times the way he's going to answer questions. So these aren't seated. I did want to know what you thought about, because FedRAMP was probably one of the biggest policies to come out of OMB. And it wasn't actually an M memo. And then we both agreed on where we thought we wanted to take this one. Was it? I was nervous doing it. What were your thoughts?
Yeah,
I don't think you get nervous though. You skydive and do all sorts of things. So.
Thanks, Drew. I think one of the things that was helpful about this term is that it has been the period of time in which, like a glacier, every year the momentum for FedRAMP reform has built. Right? So, in 2021, one of the first things I did, even before I moved back to DC to start the job in the administration this term, was I was starting to work, also sometimes late into the night, on FedRAMP legislation, right? And how we were eventually going to approach the negotiations for the law. Spending the year after that, in the early stages of the policy, spending, more time on that, getting to the point where it's coming out. So we've been able to actually spend an entire term, year by year, pushing this into position. And I think for me that helps make it obviously a lot more approachable, and you understand at every stage the support you have and what the stakeholder views are going into it. So I think this has been a really fortunate window of time for us to work on this.
So I do want to one more pointed question here. Have there been anything specific from any of the roadshows that you guys have done that have stood out to you from a comment standpoint? I'm like, hey, okay, this is good feedback, something we can incorporate into the implementation.
I think one of the big ones is the presumption of adequacy. That is at the core of FedRAMP. You authorize once and use many times. Well, that breaks down if every time and especially considering the crowd, if you get your product authorized in one agency and you go through the FedRAMP authorization process, and then the next agency wants to go back and relitigate every control and the evidence for it. So I think in the agencies, I would say the agencies that are more mature and have a more robust FedRAMP team and the security team, they seem more willing to do presumption of adequacy. And for the agencies that are earlier on in that journey, it's shown us that we need to really show that trust, where we need large agencies that have great security teams and, have more people probably on their ATO team than another IT shop may have at a smaller agency. They need to meet the people that are at both. So you need the small agency people to meet the large agency people and to build that trust between the two. Because at the end of the day, as an authorizing official, you're taking a lot of risk in that package when you sign off on it. And so knowing the people at whatever agency is the sponsor, we think has been really good feedback in an area we need to focus.
Yeah, that is probably the right thing I would flag. I mean, the presumption of adequacy, on the one hand is a nuanced statutory concept of, that sits alongside FISMA authorities for agencies, and people can spend a lot of time thinking about how do those sit next to each other. Which obviously we did, but it's actually something much more basic, which is just it's just another word for the FedRAMP brand and for the trust that you just expect people to have in a consistent way for anything that's in the FedRAMP marketplace. And so implementing that is, implementing it's implementing the mechanisms that the law and the policy call for, but it's also about really just building on the foundation that the FedRAMP brand has, so that it's a non-controversial concept.
Okay, we may come back to that in a little bit. I do want to talk broadly about the things that you have been working on, right? You talked about we're implementing in flight. All right, so you were putting out things on the FedRAMP blog for public comment. Can you talk, since we had our last session 4 weeks ago, we've seen a metrics discussion out for public comment. We've seen the crypto module policy out for public comment, and then we've seen a statement on JAB transition. Could you talk a little bit about those?
Sure, yeah, we're busy. So the JAB transition piece you mentioned, we're starting to get out, it's just some of that, clearing the air and clearing up what it is that we're going to be doing from a program office perspective to make changes to the FedRAMP marketplace, to make changes to materials, and just, of course, for those companies and mostly companies and some government providers who are part of the actual ecosystem of folks that were authorized by the JAB, what is going to happen to folks who have those authorizations, how that's being worked out with some of the agencies that comprise the former JAB. So I think it's taken us a little bit to get some of that information out there, and hopefully it's a little understandable why it does take that time. But we are in a much more communicative posture about this, and we had an industry forum not too long ago as well, where we started sharing some of this stuff in more detail and took live Q&A.
Yep.
You mentioned the metrics post. I do want to mention that. So one of the things, this is maybe one of the least flashy parts of the work that's going on here, but we take it really seriously, the fact that we have an opportunity to reshape how FedRAMP measures itself and what it considers success to be. I think there's a fair criticism of the program in the past and how it measured itself, and that it was really looking exclusively at the things that were just within its own control, and not always looking at the things that actually comprise the entirety of the FedRAMP, what the customer experience is of going through the FedRAMP program. There's a lot more complexity with what it means to actually try to measure some of those things that are not outside your control, much less work them into an accountability structure. But what we ended up publishing a couple weeks ago now are a suite of proposed ways, fairly granular ways to measure the program on time, cost, and security. And so that's open for a public comment period. We actually are extending it, the public comment period, an extra week. So it'll close September 5th. There's still plenty of room for more comments in there, and would really encourage folks to take this opportunity, because it's not just from the government and bureaucratic standpoint, if nothing else, it's going to be a long time until the hood gets opened up that widely again for a metrics overhaul. So really take the time to look into it.
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things for us. So at OMB, it's kind of interesting. We go out for public comment. Eric talked a lot about this. And we're very open, and then we bring everything in, and we describe, we close the shutters, and then we start working on stuff, and then we open up the shutters again and we close. So we're always going through that process. I think one of the big drivers is just to be frank, Claren and Jason Miller, and they are both of them, and OMB leadership is what are we doing to make this better, to get more solutions for the agencies and the people that are driving mission outcomes. And they're like, this is too expensive, it takes too long, I need it faster and better. And that's a constant conversation she has with us. And I think she and Jason will both say, while Eric's left, or I may leave, whatever I'm thinking of for working on something, every day they're like, you need to be, we work for them, directly. And so Jason still probably tasks you whenever he sees you in OMB, and Claire's like, Drew, you need to deliver this day in and day out. And she also gives me top cover. So when you have those type of things, it allows you to go much faster in a place like OMB, and then we can provide that top cover to agencies. And I will say, with specifically on metrics, when you start a program or an effort, you're giving 110% every day, and you're just driving to deliver work. And it's I'm doing awesome. But then after a while, you're how am I going to measure this? I want to show other people the value that we're doing. And when the program started, it really was important to get these IaaS providers in and some PaaS providers. And so they had the right metrics to do that. But as we pivot towards SaaS, the metrics don't measure the same. And getting feedback from you all would really be helpful, because like we have to have a partnership here. We're not building software anymore. We are like procuring it, securing it, and using change management to implement it. So those are like the three like areas. We're not shipping code. So we need you to do that in a certain way. So like if we're not incentivizing you the right way to do that, like to ship good code and like give us the best products, like tell us what those are. And like also understand that those metrics will drive major decisions and also budget, leadership decisions, and how we measure success. So like you can't come in later after we've made like these type of commitments, and then our budgets take years to bake in. You know, like we're looking ahead multiple years right now. Like once those get set and moving, like this is your chance to really like design where we want to be in the next 3 to 5 years. And then just lastly, what I'll say is like, we want this to be success on the government side, at OMB, at GSA, and at the agencies. And those metrics are going to be like the key provider, and like how that is like successful 5 years, 10 years from now. There's going to always be anecdotal feedback. There will always be those type of things, but these metrics are what we're really to judge whether like the policies and everything that we put in place is successful down the road.
Okay, so I'm gonna get kind of specific here, right? There's a couple things you can measure, right? You at the PMO can measure certain things. You can measure the PMO's interaction with agencies. You can measure the PMO's interaction with cloud service providers. You at OMB can measure agencies' interactions with both of those folks as well. How are you, OMB and GSA, working together with the tools that you have to ensure that those metrics are, you're gathering the appropriate data given both of those lenses so that you can get a really clear picture, right? So in other words, are you working with the SIGI? Are you working with the inspectors general? Are you working with the GAO? Are you working with the FITARA scorecard? How are you taking the metrics, Eric, that you're seeking over the PMO and spreading them across all of the tools that you have to measure success?
Yeah, and Chris, well, one thing that I learned a lot from Chris when he was at OMB. One of them was how to use FSMA metrics to get change in the federal government. It's one of the most powerful tools, and he was really elegant in the way that he did it. Like nobody wants to be pinged from, and we all have bosses, you know, like and a couple levels up. You do not want to be overburdened by the data calls that you're given. You want those to be like reflect your best work. You want them to be automated to as much as possible, and you want them to be transparent so that you're reporting up, and then you're reporting up to OMB. So at the agencies, like you just want to put out good numbers and then get focused back on your work. And we think about that a lot when we're shaping the FSMA metrics. And to get to that, like one of the things that we're doing is the CISO Council has a sub-working group that's focused on what are those right metrics. So we're hearing from the agencies, like what they're going to best be able to provide and how we can effectively work together on that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, GSA is going to be able to measure it's going to be able to measure and engage with customers that it works with on the things that it can measure. And I think one thing I would encourage folks to think about if and when you engage on the proposed metrics that we put out, which may well be different from some of the things that OMB does and others do, is don't just think about it from what is it I want to know, but also think about it in terms of the incentives that it places on the program. The art of good metrics is the art of getting the most positive, constructive incentives with the fewest perverse incentives. And so that's how we're going to be thinking about it when we look at this, to make sure we're lining up the behavior that it incentivizes after everybody on this table is out of government and it's continuing to work. So that's how I think about it from the GSA side.
Okay, so we will, once those are finalized, we'll continue to hopefully we'll be able to work with you guys and get updates on how you're incorporating those broadly across the ecosystem. All right, let's go move over to the JAB announcement that came out. I know you talked a little bit about it already, but one of the things that we at ADI have put out a letter asking about how you are measuring the risks associated with various ATOs. I wanted to ask you guys, how do you, as you push forward with the presumption of adequacy, and as you have that in the marketplace, how are you also indicating where risks are and are not going to be accepted? How are you enabling agencies to adequately look for and consume cloud services without adding new risk into their environments?
Yeah, I think I'll start off, and then one of the directives when Claire and Chris set out to like redo FedRAMP, Claire was very specific, and she said, "I want to move this from a compliance program to a security program." She's like, as a federal CIO, I would, she'd get us ATO package that was like 1.5 inches deep, 800 pages. She's like, I still don't know that like my systems aren't secure. And Chris was like, we can document, like all of these controls, but that's probably not the most pressing vulnerability or pressing threats that we're facing. And so they both like set this North Star with us, like, how do we push for the maximum, like the maximum amount of security that we can provide, showing like appropriate like vulnerabilities. And Chris talks a lot about this. By the way, this isn't like, Chris isn't going to buy me a drink later for mentioning his name so much. But like one of the things that he talked about is we need to move from like the position of like preventing vulnerabilities. Like that's where the world that we live in. Like we're going to have those. We need to respond to them and remediate them as soon as possible. If you're a CIO and you've got like a batting average that gets you into the Hall of Fame, like you're doing a really good job. So like that's really the way that we look at this, and like the ability to respond. And when we're talking to CIOs, we're like, okay, so here are the documents we're providing you. This is what we're giving you, but there's also the continuous monitoring. There's ongoing like relationships that we have with software companies. There's like a further, and Chris, another Chris will be from CFPB, and hopefully he'll talk about, like the relationships that he's building with software companies. Like you have to be open and transparent. Like we're in this together. Like if there is a vulnerability, like we're going to spend a lot of time reacting to it. You're going to spend a lot of time reacting to it. And neither of them is really delivering like the customer value that we want. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think if anybody, there's a number of people in this room who've been authorizing officials before. Some of you are now. I have been one before myself. Anybody who's put their name on something like that knows that there is no such thing as a risk-free package, right? There's no such thing as a risk-free system. And working in risk management, whether it's government or not, just means accepting that into your bones. And what FedRAMP needs to be doing, is understanding that and making on every FedRAMP authorization, no matter how it was made in the past, present, and future, agencies need to have all the information available to them to understand what the risks are. And there's no such thing. And when I say risk, I don't mean compliance risk, right? I mean security risk, the risks that matter the most. That we always will be and do today provide as much information as we can and get that out of the cloud provider for agencies to be able to assess that. But again, there's no such thing as something that has no risks in it, and that's part of what every federal CIO knows.
And I think I would add to that, like you are doing a great job over at GSA of hiring talent and building that into your culture. Like the security talent that you're bringing on board is able to have those conversations.
And one of the things I liked about what you said, Drew, is like what I heard you say was the emphasis on security architecture as well, right? Like that we want to, as if you are actually owning a federal system, you care about more than just that 1.5 inch thick sheet of paper. You also care about what you know about the system, like the intelligence with which it was designed, and the resilience that it has overall to threats. And that's really important. And what we want to be doing and what we're investing in is having the capacity and understanding and the reflection through our policies that sets us up to be that security program that can care not just about having gone through each control to everybody's satisfaction, but actually an understanding of what it means to be operating a system in a contemporarily secure way. And that's what I heard you say, and that's the direction we're trying to go.
I think I was
gonna say, that sounds like a lot of time associated with it. So how do you do that in a way that's still moving the process forward in a faster way? Is that where OSCAL comes in? Is that where the GRC tool comes in?
Yeah, one of the things, so our OSCAL and data standards lead, Dave Waltermeyer, one of his lines that I really like is, we're working to use automation to make sure that the humans are doing the human-worthy tasks and the computers are doing the computer-worthy tasks. And automation isn't going to suddenly suck all the security judgment out of a process, but what it can do is leave only that which the humans have to deal with. And so one of the things that we're really, working to get out of the automation and data modernization initiatives that we have is to cut significant amounts of time and costs out of the process that are spent, unfortunately, on things that, are more in the objective arena, things around completeness and in places where we don't have to be spending our time, which is, of course, time spent on the government side as well, not just the company side.
Yeah, I think the other thing that we're really trying to change the culture around is overclassification. So and as an authorizing official, like when you go and you talk to somebody about their system, like all of a sudden it's like a national security system that's coordinating satellites and like airstrikes in a foreign country. And you're like, that's what a high system is. Is that what you're doing? They're like, well, no, I have a ticketing system. So, okay, maybe that could be like moderate or low. Let's go ahead and look at the data and have like a conversation around that. So what we're pushing and want to get to is like, look at the data, look at the functioning, like realistically, what type of system are you running? If this is a low impact SaaS or like something low, like get it to the classification as low as you can so you can get it in the door as a CISO, as an authorizing official, start working with the company on the controls, and over time, like mature that relationship, mature that understanding and that architecture so that it's not like I'm trying to bring in everything at high or moderate. It's going to take multiple years, millions of dollars. Like, let's find cheaper, faster ways to bring these products in. If they serve the mission set, like work with the same way we would work with features in the past and delivering features, like do that with security. Like always make sure you're covering your bases, but don't overclassify these. And I think that'll really cut down on the time. The LISAS, to me is just like a great starting point for people. Come in, you don't need a 3PAO or for a CSP in a product, like get that in, get it working with that team in the agencies, get sponsored, and then work your way up over time.
Okay, so a couple quick follow-ups. One, Eric, any updates on the timing on the GRC tool?
We have made an award at this point,
okay,
which I think is public. So that we're
or it is now.
That is certainly is now. No, I'm pretty sure if you dig through some materials, you'll find that it's public. But yeah, so that is awarded, and we're working on configuring it. And yeah, for folks maybe not familiar, that's one of the infrastructural investments we're trying to make so that we will have, for example, production APIs where companies and agencies can just wire their stuff up directly, and we don't need to have humans filling out web forms and sending emails as much.
The other kind of quick question, this one's for you, Drew, is I appreciate you're talking about the cultural shift associated with how folks are approaching packages and looking at them. How are you approaching the cultural normalization of authorizing officials' approach to packages? And what I mean by that is, in order for you guys to have reuse broadly and ubiquitously, there's got to be trust, which you referenced earlier. So how do you, aside from introducing small agencies to large agencies, how do you build that trust, and how do you hold accountable in a way that promotes that trust going forward?
So I think that problem is similar to a lot of different industries. I think government's a little bit different in that there's no incentive for a first mover. Like you're not advantaged by getting out in front of your peers. So we really have to look for like individuals that are doing it. I think of people like Bo Burles, Hamad, some people at DoD, like larger agencies that are able to like look across. They're balancing. They've got a huge like shadow IT footprint of people like using stuff that they know is out there, but they want to really bring it in so they can have a better working relationship with their business lines. And they've got to find innovative ways to do that because our budgets aren't expanding. Like we have a set number of dollars that we're going to put on it, and most agencies are not planning for that. Like the business lines are not planning for ongoing security costs year after year. So like you look at how they are structuring their programs and you start sharing that knowledge. So Bo has got like a great process for bringing in products, working with them. He's very open, very knowledgeable. He's got a great team. And then when other agencies see that and see that he's successful and see that he's making it through the IG, like oversight and how to talk to, and you talked about SIG and some of the other IGs, like there's an educational component with the IGs as well. When you get a CISO that's forward leaning and using good tools and has a great team, and you've got an IG that understands the risks that they're taking when they're like doing when they're within policy, doing the things that they want to do, like that can be adopted by other agencies. Like other agencies see that. They have the same problems, but they may not be willing to like lean in until they see somebody that's successful with it. So our job is really like highlighting the work that he's doing, because he's not gonna go out on a road show.
Right.
Like Bo's busy, he's got like work all day long. So then it's our job to go and bring in people, like help distribute those tools, help educate the other IGs, bring up the skill level of the talent of the federal employees.
Yeah, and big jobs. All right, I've got two other questions.
That takes like a week.
Yeah, right. Good. We'll have some more sessions along the way.
Yeah.
So heard you mention resourcing and the budget, the mission owners aren't necessarily planning for continuous security monitoring going forward. So how does this fit into the broader budgeting conversation? How are you working with agencies? What's the realistic ability for them to adopt and stand up a team that can read and use OSCAL? Any number of things that are in that memo. How do you build that into the budgeting process?
So we do have a very ceremonial budget process inside of OMB where we produce the president's budget every year while I can't talk obviously specifics, one of the areas is like in our position, the more questions you ask, the more directive the agency has to respond. And the numbers don't matter oftentimes as much as the intention and the process is going through it. So when we put out in guidance, like tell us your FedRAMP budget, tell us how many products you're going to be sponsoring this year, how many you're going to be authorizing, like tell us the components, like then that travels through like all the CFOs who are like, I don't know what these words mean, but I know that like my CIO probably knows. So then they go to the CIO and they're like, tell me your answers. And so then we get the answers back up through a budget process. We're not always successful, like getting them all of the, because there are competing priorities and everything at that amount, but at least over time we can monitor that. So it was like, we draw a line in the sand the first year or snap the chalk, like understand what they're spending as their baseline. The next year we can get up a little bit. Hopefully we can reallocate, show that those investments were good, that we were able to deprecate some old systems. Like it starts a virtuous cycle. But having that conversation, especially, I've seen this with Chris and when he was at OMB and Claire, especially like when IT is brought up in our budget, our internal budget meetings early on and often, and people get to understand on the mission delivery side, like how important it is and how much of an enabler it is, whether it's AI, whether it's ZTA, or and certainly like FedRAMP's the third, like the most important, probably the most important, more than AI. I'm joking, but like, when they see that on the mission delivery side and they start talking about it, we know we're winning. And Claire describes like she's really good at getting our director's attention during meetings. Like the director will look at her and say, Claire, like, are you in line with this? And when you see that shift in budgeting and IT across the federal government, like that's like that's a cascading influence down to the agencies, down to specific programs, and hopefully down to like the people that are doing the work inside the agencies to bring more products in.
Anything you want to say?
Yeah, obviously I'll defer all the most fun budget questions to my colleague here, but when people like you, Ross, and others ask us, like, do you have all the resources to do all of your hopes and dreams, much less everybody here's hopes and dreams? I don't say yes to that. But I think what's important is that we're not taking the stance of, well, it'd be nice to do any of these things, but we can't do anything until we have more money. Instead, we are taking the stance and position that we're going to show that this is an engine, that when you put money into it, good things come out the other side, that it's fuel for work and it's fuel for delivering. And so I certainly hope that's coming across, but that is how we're approaching this. And we want to show that this is putting good money after good.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you guys saying that. I'm curious though, in the short term, is there a way to leverage working capital funds? Is there a way to leverage the TMF for OSCAL? In the short run, if you're going to do this in 18 months, if you're going to and you're going to have other folks who are really focused as authorizing officials, you need smart, well-trained bodies doing work that they aren't doing already. And then, you need training dollars and you need money for IT as well. So is there a way to leverage some of the funds that are out there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are, and you mentioned a lot of them, working capital funds, TMF. I've seen in agencies where business lines come to the table early with their CIOs and are like, I understand that there's now a security component to this. Like, I'm gonna bring business dollars to help supplement that. We've seen where agencies, when they do leverage FedRAMP products, like the difference of running an old system or ATOing a new system, like if your decision of buy or build comes down to like not only the product, but also the ATO cost, like there's so much lower. So yeah, and it does take innovative things. I think nothing's off the table for us. Like, we're scrappy. We try and do everything we can. So I would never say no to anything. I mean, it's got to be legal, but like.
It's good to know. All right, so we've got about 6 minutes left. Are you guys open to taking a couple questions from the audience?
Sure.
All right, great. So if you want to ask a question, you have a microphone up front on either side. Make sure you turn it on, or you may have it at your table. Turn it on and ask a question. If you want to raise your hand, I'll call on you.
Hard ones to Ross. Like, give him like a good couple.
Happy to, especially if you're an ADI member.
Yes.
Can you also say your name and the organization you're from? Just make sure it's turned on. You can just start talking, it'll pick up.
Dookie, AWS. One of the toughest policies is kind of not at the 30,000-foot level, it goes kind of one level deeper. And so might not be reflected in the vision of the roadmap, but kind of goes towards the spirit of it, is the correction action plan triggers. And it really impacts the ability for cloud service providers to maintain their SLAs despite the growth in their model. So what I mean by this is, right now, those, well, first of all, the corrective action triggers are, if you don't, patch your high vulnerabilities within 30 days, there's a certain grace period. You exceed that, you get escalated. Perfect policy, nothing wrong with that. We should be accountable. But the triggers are static in nature. So, I'm just throwing out a number. If you exceed that threshold by, say, 10 endpoints, if 10 endpoints didn't get patched within those 30 days, you get this cap, this corrective action. And perhaps that is a problem if you only have 100 endpoints, right? That's 10% of your fleet is not patched within the SLA, definitely a problem. If you have 100 million endpoints and only 10 don't meet that SLA, you have room to improve, but I think you're doing a good job of risk management within the spirit of the requirement. So having that policy kind of reflective of more dynamic triggers that account for scale, architecture, makeup, service, would probably make more sense, so that we're triggering these risk triggers where they make sense and bringing attention where it really needs to be from an accountability standpoint. I think this concept is well understood. I've spoken to a lot of the staff on the FedRAMP team, and they're like, spot on. Yeah, we do want to address this. So there's the intent to it, and I'm happy to hear that. Kind of goes towards that collaborative environment that has been set by this administration, more so than I'm career fed, and I really hadn't seen prior to coming to AWS, and I hadn't seen this level of collaboration, particularly from any federal entity, as I have recently. So kudos to that effort. But in the spirit of doing that, while we got the intention, we don't have a clear timeline. I understand timelines are not easy to commit to as well. But I think understanding where this is in the priority chain and setting some rough goals around when a draft will be released for public comment that addresses this challenge would go a long way. And I was wondering if you can speak to that at all.
I mean, I'm glad to hear that you got a good common sense response from the team when you engaged on it as well. It's obviously a great point. Now, I'm not able to speak here to timelines of particular policies, but And we right now are going through a pretty, significant kind of initial burst of work on some of the very long held priority policy changes that people have been looking for a while, right? Like things around FIPS 140. We have stuff coming up later this year around external services, what cloud providers can use of other cloud providers, that sort of thing. So our focus has been on some of those things more visibly. I think you're going to see us get a lot more into the details. And I very much am expecting the team to set up something more granular on that. I will also just take this opportunity to mention that we have a position that is opening next Wednesday that we have public materials up about right now on GSA's TTS's join site for the security director for the FedRAMP program, whose job it will be to do exactly what you're talking about and lead the process of both working through the substance of issues like that, as well as actually instrument a reasonably transparent, understandable kind of process for changes like that. So I'll just take an opportunity to point that out to folks as well who may not have seen that we are hiring for a key security role in the program, and to think about that as well.
Yeah, here's your chance. Come back in.
There you go.
And all right, well, we have time now for one more question. Anybody? If not, yeah, go ahead. Just make sure it's turned on, Tom. You good? Just talk. You'll be fine.
Yeah. Tom Ryder with Telos. So it's exciting. Memo signed. You guys made an award for your OSCAL. There's a placeholder on the webpage that there's going to be pilots. Everyone here is here because we're forward looking and we're doing that. But there's also nobody's actively looking to disrupt. So if I don't want to do it, how long do I have before I have to do OSCAL, either as an advisor or a 3PAO or an agency or a cloud service provider?
Drew, do you remember what the?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Like I'd have to do a control F in the memo. Like I also can't force you to do it. Let me give you a somewhat more granular answer. I mean, regardless of very high level deadlines from a policy memo, there's lots of actual just real world granular things that are going to happen. Like APIs have to get stood up, specifications have to be defined. That stuff has to happen before anybody can be told to do anything in a meaningful way. And so and all of that stuff that we're doing, in addition to just kind of generally trying to be a transparent program, on the technical side of things, all of the stuff is actually open source as well. And we're just doing this stuff in public repositories. So you should have a really strong understanding of how far things along are and where things are going. And of course, you should be experiencing a collaborative relationship with the staff who can read you in on that stuff as well for whatever is not appropriate there. So that's what I'll just say to that is we're going to be, it's not going to come out of nowhere.
All right. I think we are at time on our end. Any other final thoughts you guys want to, any guidance coming down the pipe you want to announce? No?
I guess I'll also just mention, I'm guessing this room is aware, but we have another public comment period open on our guidance related to how we apply FIPS 140 validation. Many of the people in this room have been poking the program, and sometimes me personally, to do this stuff for a while. So I really hope that you're taking the opportunity to comment while the window is open on it.
All right. True.
Yeah. I think just like in general, I like the way and Heather no, sorry, that's my wife, Claire, who actually gets more of my time than my wife. Claire talked about like human-centered policy, like we're building policy from listening to you all. And like, that is not an easy way to write policy. It like takes longer.
Takes forever.
We get hundreds of comments. It just takes us a lot of time. So I appreciate like you all taking part in that. Like it's not, this doesn't get better for us to write better policy. And whether it's the OMB level or the feedback that we're looking for without you guys taking an active role. So I think you see us out a lot. Many of you are more than willing to give me feedback at the end where I'm doing well. I appreciate more where we can improve. And I hope that you continue to see that, but it does take effort on our end like to prepare for these, to like come to these sessions. So the more that you can interact and provide that feedback, we really value it. Because we are, and I said this earlier, like we're all in this together. Like we are, as we move like our forward in IT and federal IT, like it is both of us working together to serve the missions on each of these federal agencies. And that's really important. We both have a good working relationship. Of course, we'd love to see more people come and apply for our positions. We are always looking to bring in great talent. So if you've got good young talent, tell them about the awesome teams that Eric and I have put together and like want to join the federal government. It's a great way to spend a couple of years. You get to come and talk to great people and stuff. It's, you know, it's very exciting. So those two areas would really help us a lot. And I will judge you in the next couple of years on your feedback and how many people you bring to us.
Well, don't you have to worry about us. Just like you
Ross,
guys.
can I add sorry, go ahead.
I was saying, just like you guys talk about being in it for the long haul, everybody in here who's part of a vendor are in it for the long haul with this policy. We've been here for years and we're going to continue to be here with you. So we appreciate your ability to be dynamic in your comments and open to receiving comments, and we'll be here to continue to provide them. But
Awesome. Well, I just wanted to end on a somewhat more affirmative note too. Of just, I was really happy by you bring up the example of, you know, the static number of endpoints in the policy. Like, I'm glad that you like reached out and tried to talk through that. And you got a decent response. I think one of the things I'm proudest of that we are doing right now is bringing really substantial technical capacity and expertise into the program, position by position. Government hiring is not easy. Also convincing people that FedRAMP is exciting, sometimes not easy. We are doing that, and we're actually like having we're seeing really unusually strong responses for people seeing what's going on and wanting to join. And so I just sometimes I have encountered folks who, you know, have experienced FedRAMP as a bit of a black box and something that they don't think to bring their complex technical questions to. And I hope that people are seeing what's going on and you know, checking that instinct that they have of like, hey, let's actually just go and try to talk with them and raise this, and it might go somewhere good. So I think it's a better note than that.
yep, we appreciate it. Thank you, guys. All right, up next, we have Grant Schneider, and he'll introduce the panel. So we have.
Yes, feel free to grab beverages or bio breaks as you guys need them. So first of all, I really want to thank Drew and Eric for the conversation. Super helpful, super informative, and really important to know that, you know, the program is seeking to be collaborative and seeking to really evolve, and having worked inside of OMB and been on and now in industry and really seen both sides. You know, all of these things we talk about, public-private partnerships. I think we often use it as a throwaway phrase, kind of like information sharing, but it's only a public-private partnership if all of us actually make it one, right? If we all just talk about it being one, then it's not. And if we're waiting for someone else to come around and make it a partnership, it's not going to happen. It's on kind of each and every one of us. So, you know, really appreciate the openness, appreciate the direction that the program's going in. Super excited to be joined here. Unfortunately, we were going to have Zari Singer, but Eric gave her a whole bunch of work to do or something along those lines, and she was not able to join us today. But we've got Allison from OMB and Chris from CFPB. I'll let them do some intros in a second. And we really want to have a dialogue. We're definitely going to take comments and questions from the audience around, okay, you know, what does this kind of mean from the day-to-day business, right? Where does this start to get us to? How is the implementation part? You know, I think the last group really talked about the implementation is where this matters most. So how does implementation start to happen, knowing that we're implementing while we're continuing to make policy and while we're continuing to change and while we're continuing to evolve. So let me start though, Allison, if you can just talk a little bit on your background and kind of your role at OMB, and then Chris will have you do the same thing.
Sure. Allison O'Mara, I've been with the Office of the Federal CIO for a little over a year now. I'm currently working with the FedRAMP team on implementation and engagement. And prior to that, spent 2 years with GSA and private sector previous to that.
Fantastic. Chris?
Yeah, Chris Chilbert. I'm the CIO of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB. I've been there for about 4 years. I was at the Department of Health and Human Services, Office of Inspector General as the CIO before that, and spent many years at DHS and then a contractor before that. Yeah, definitely been a big consumer of FedRAMP over the years.
Yeah, I love that we have Chris here because you've hit all aspects of this space, right?
I was actually at DHS when it got started, so I remember the early days.
Yes. So between being at CISA, being in industry, being on the IG side, which I think is super interesting. I love when we get crossover between IGs and CIO and CISO roles. I think it's super helpful. So I want to start, and I think Drew and Eric talked about this as well, but from your perspectives, what are you guys seeing or hearing? Allison, what are you hearing from either agencies or from RMOs, resource management, the budget side of OMB or others about, FedRAMP and the new policy and kind of where it's going? And then Chris, also, curious on what you're hearing from your peers, what you're hearing internally from your team. Is there excitement, angst, some of both?
Yeah, so just to get started, I would say from a CSP standpoint, JAB transition, probably no shocker there. Thank you. Is it better? Yeah. So CSP's JAB transition and GSA actually last week published just a blog article, updates and next steps. If you haven't yet read it, encourage you to go out and check it out. Also paths to authorizations. That's something else from a CSP standpoint. And just questions around the governance model, right? We have the FISCAC, we have the FedRAMP board, we have the tag. And from an agency standpoint, I would say presumption of adequacy. We talked about that. Drew and Eric just talked about that. But what does that mean operationally? If I'm an agency CIO, what does that mean? What does it mean to me? I'd also say multiple joint authorizations. Like, how do I get started? If I'm an agency, how do I take advantage of that? What do I do? And we tell them, work with the FedRAMP team, reach out, ask them if, hey, are other agencies having the same ask? And for the CSPs in the room, if you're working with multiple agencies, be a bridge, convene those folks together. And then the third, I would say digital authorizations, just OSCAL adoption. What does that look like?
And I definitely want to, we're going to come back to the automation one for sure. I do want to ask on the other questions that you're getting around how do we work together? How do we do joint authorizations? Do we have answers yet? Are there playbooks that we can point to people to, or are we, collaborating and kind of figuring it out as we go along?
That's a good question. Honestly, I'd say we're in the nascent stages. It's really OMB working in tandem with the GSA FedRAMP PMO team. But we are telling agencies, reach out to the FedRAMP team as the first start. Drew mentioned roadshows. I feel like it's really hard to follow Drew on this topic, I swear. But in terms of like the roadshows that we're conducting, and we've done maybe like 10 to 12 so far. So we're just starting out. But as we're hearing things from agencies, what we are trying to do from an OMB standpoint is connect folks together, connect agencies together.
And one other question on the joint authorizations, is this, how can the CSPs participate? Because I imagine for some CSPs, the last thing you want to do is, as we've all done when we've collaborated on that memo together where everyone got the same amount of input, there's maybe different sets of requirements or different sets of expectations between the multi-agencies that we're working through. What's the role, like how involved can the CSP be in that?
I don't want to speak for the FedRAMP team, but I would say this is an area where collectively we need to lean in and work together to figure it out, to come up with a win-win.
Great. Chris, what are you hearing? What are you seeing? What are your guys?
Yeah, so
telling
we,
you.
again, this is one of the first questions we're always going to ask company that we talk to is, what is your FedRAMP status, right? So as a small agency, as we all know, we talk about, you have only so many resources and we only have so much capacity. We still have very demanding business stakeholders within the organization. That's true where I am today. It's true where I've been before. They want to know, hey, why can't we use this that I used at this other agency is using? Or next question is, well, how soon can we use it, right? Yeah, they want it, like once we have the agreement, we're going to go forward. They want it like tomorrow, right? So what FedRAMP does is helps us with both of those questions, right? So, Eric made a good point. When I sign something, I know that we're accepting risk. I'm accepting risk on behalf of the government for our agency. If it's just that, well, this other agency somewhere off is using this, and so therefore I just have to trust them that we can do it. That's one thing. It's another thing when you have a whole program that has a mechanism for collecting that evidence, and I know that it's going to be there, and we can presume that it's acceptable. And then with respect to using something sooner, there's always things that you have to do to implement. But when you can cut out a lot of those steps for collecting the evidence or doing the work that needs to be done to authorize a system, that really helps out a lot and helps really speed the adoption.
Well, and I think one of the misnomers perhaps that happens around FedRAMP, and when we talk about presumption of adequacy, it's not presumption that the amount of risk someone else decided to accept is the same amount of risk that I'm
Correct.
comfortable. It's really around that the package, the 800 pages, unfortunately, that we're accepting the package as that it was done appropriately and properly, and that it's reflecting the actual status of the system, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's a starting point, right? So the FedRAMP gets you most of the way there, not all the way there. So there's still a customer responsibility matrix that is, as an agency, we're still responsible for doing. And so there's going to be potentially risk associated with things that are not in place. Also, there may be controls, and again, you're never going to get 100% controls before something gets authorized. So we want to understand what that is. And if we have a different situation, whether we're going to accept that, whether that meets the risk threshold that our director has set. So, again, there's a little bit, but again, most of that work, a lot of that work is off our plates, but through FedRAMP. With respect to that, I do want to talk about that customer relationship matrix a little bit, because I talked to my security team and what should I talk about today, right? And so one of the things that bring up all the time is, yes, we have all these controls, it really helps us out, but there are still things we have to do that we're responsible for. So if I were to say to industry, how could you help us with that? Help us, we are responsible for creating a security configuration baseline and then be able to implement that baseline and then demonstrate that we can do it. So, when you do it on our own, we have to learn the technology, we have to do the research to figure out how to implement those controls and then integrate it into our system. So to the extent that that can be made easier, that's something that really helps us speed adoption. And it's something that it might even make the difference between, as we make choices between two different products, right? Which is the one that we can more easily adopt.
So your ability to have insight into how quickly they're going to be able to get there, and the kind of the starting point where the service is at today.
Yeah, I mean, there's a concept, and I think that Elsa has talked about too, is like creating this concept of a reference architecture, right? So security architecture is important. That gets into, again, there's the baseline controls that you have to put in, or the configuration that you have to do. So helping us get to that point is something that we would benefit from.
So Chris, what is your team kind of most excited about with the updates and evolution and the work that's being done for the FedRAMP program?
Yeah, it's an interesting word, exciting, right? So I'm excited. I tell
Looking
people all the
forward
time.
to.
Yeah, no, I get excited. I am geeky enough that I get excited about all of this stuff, right? And so I think we're excited to know that we've been being a younger agency, we've adopted a lot of cloud-based services. And knowing that the program is being reinforced, as well as it's scaling up, so you can have more SaaS providers as well, that open up more opportunities to us, right? So that there's sometimes you know that there's technology that the agency wants to use. It's not FedRAMP. Okay, we say, well, we can do it when we get to it, right? But it's not necessarily going to be right away. So increasing the number of products available to us to choose from,
Getting
that
more,
really,
more capabilities, available
right?
faster.
And again, we're mission, but then we all start off, right? We're not here just to do the technology. We're here to accomplish a mission. And everything starts from that mission.
Are you at all concerned that bringing more capabilities faster into the marketplace, into the government, adds risk in some way, shape, or form?
There's always that, right? So you're always going to be, you're never.
Well,
not
adds
concerned,
unacceptable
right?
risk, maybe.
Yeah. So that's what, yeah, again, we want to, it's not about just doing a sprint and just kind of taking things on as fast as you can. You're still going to consider things. But again, a lot of that work is taken off your plate when you go do it through what FedRAMP provides. And again, what else can talk more to it, is a systematic approach to being able to understand what that risk is and make better decisions.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Just having the information at your fingertips to be able to make risk-based decision. It's just opening up the aperture. So there are more products, more tools out there. And Claire referenced this in her opening, the cloud landscape is so different now compared to in 2011 when the memo first came out. So it's being able to take advantage of the cloud products and services that are out there to improve the services that we provide to the public.
Well, and to be able to do that, and Claire mentioned the reduction of time and cost, right? I mean, for everyone in the room that's gone and everyone online that's gone through the process, it's painful and it's expensive and it takes a really long time, right? And I think the question is, how do we make it less of all of those things so that you can deliver to your mission and customers those innovative technologies faster?
Exactly. Yeah. And again, it's it's as we look at this, right? Just having this program behind you, it just gives it also helps engage in the conversations with our business partners too, right? So we know over time, as we've dealt with my peers across our organization, they don't ask that question too, right? So we know that they'll deal with industry, they'll see something out there. That's one of the first questions that many of my peers will ask now too. Is it FedRAMP, or are you in FedRAMP?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So your customers are already doing some market research on the tools that they want to use and coming to you.
They always come there. Everybody has a list, right? So
yeah. I guess, what do you think, what are the biggest gaps that you think these changes are addressing? Allison, you want to?
Well, I would say, first and foremost, I don't think there are any surprises when I say this, just the process itself can be a black box, right? So how can we increase transparency and visibility? And that would be one. Another is just the amount of time it takes to get through the process and how expensive it is. So that's where with the introduction of like automation, for example, to look to speed things up. So it's not taking forever and a day to get something through the process. So we're getting it to agencies faster so they can just use it sooner rather than later.
Chris, automation, any thoughts on automation, on movement to OSCAL? Is that something that, you feel your organization is, ready to take on, is waiting to see how it's gonna fall out and what you're gonna have to do? Like, where are we really at in automation?
Yeah.
Another word that sounds great, like we're gonna automate and that's gonna make it faster.
Yeah, I mean, that's Apple. Right,
it's a lot of work.
Right. So it is to some degree mother and apple pie to say automation. We all want to automate, but I do agree with it, right? So if you want to raise the level for all of the organizations, if you want to be able to actually implement all the things that we want to do with FedRAMP, automation is going to be important. And having a standard like OSCAL that allows you to also get consistency across the board, right? So that also gets back to your previous question, right? So how do you understand the risk that every other agencies are accepting? That's something that will go to, again, ensure that you have more consistency across the board. More ability to, as Eric said, focus your people on the people decisions and less on some of those things that computers can do. So I think that's an incredibly important part of it. So as far as we've tried to do things within our organization to automate to the extent that we can. When I look at in ATO today, for example, with my organization, I'm not looking at the 600 page stack of paper anymore. We have dashboards and things we can do to actually dive into it, which is great. So I definitely support increasing that government wide, and look forward to participating in that.
Well, and if I could add on too, there are agencies are on a spectrum, right, in terms of where they are with the automation. There are early adopters. We had the opportunity to actually chat with Chris and his team last week on, their landscape and what they're doing. And I said to him today, I was so impressed by what they've done at CFPB. Are there some agencies that are on the other end of the spectrum? There was the question earlier about how long do I have? 24 months per the memo. So July 2026 is the timeline. But we are seeing again, we have not done a bunch, but 10 or so, but the agencies that we're working with, there are some that are leading into the space, and it's pretty exciting to see. And if they're not leading into the space, they're asking us, like, help us understand what does that roadmap look like for getting there, and asking questions about the centralized platform that Eric mentioned. So it is pretty exciting.
And Allison, how is OMB working with agencies who aren't coming to you? Because a lot of the people that maybe are on the other end of the spectrum, you hear from less often, I imagine. So, is there an effort to help get those lessons learned and actually pushing them out? And maybe this gets back to some of the measures and metrics that you have available to sort of understand that.
Yeah, we were actually just talking about this today. So we're going to be doing a retro for the agencies that we've met with thus far to capture like lessons learned, what's working well, where there needs to be some improvement. But we do plan, we have a list of 80 plus agencies that we are in the process of reaching out to. So when we say we're conducting agency roadshow, like we are hitting these agencies. We are having 1 to 2 hour conversations to better understand the landscape. And ultimately, key question I ask in these conversations is, we have the power of OMB behind us, right? So how can we as OMB help you agency be successful in implementing the milestones, the requirements that we've outlined in this memo?
Anything you want to add for other agencies or engagements? Like, are you having engagements with peer organizations? Have you talked to other agencies about, hey, we're trying to bring this product in, how can we work together?
Yeah, we talked, and again, I think that's very important, right? To collaborate. That's the purpose of this program, but even informally, speak to my peers across agencies, especially across agencies within a similar area to where we work. We do that all the time and encourage our teams to do that. So there's a significant amount of collaboration and conversation on those across agencies.
And I would add too that in addition to the just one-on-one agency outreach that we're doing, just in partnership with GSA, agencies have identified FedRAMP agency liaisons. We're having a session with them in September, as well as looking for just a broader public engagement forum. Also earlier, later-ish, I'll say in September, as a connection point, in addition to just engaging internally in the various communities of practice across the government.
Great. I want to see if there's any questions in the audience. I've got 1 or 2 more, but anyone? Yeah. I think there's one right behind you.
Thank you. Jim Masella with Coal Fire. So I was wondering, with all the agency roadshows that you all are doing, what are some of the biggest myths or misconceptions you're hearing from the agencies, or do they all perfectly understand the FedRAMP program, or what are you seeing out there when you're talking to them?
I mean, presumption of adequacy is a big one. Again, like how do we operationalize that? And it comes back to that element of trust, right? Agency A, signed off, bless something, for lack of a better term. How do I know that it's really good to go? That is one that I'll highlight. I'm thinking back.
So what's the answer to that?
That's a good question. I don't have the answer. There are some things that we published the guidance end of July, and there are some areas that we're still, I would say, in the nascent stages. Honestly, just trying to figure things out. And that's why it's great, GSA is continuing to push out information, resources, soliciting public comment. So if you haven't yet gone to their website, if you haven't read any of the recently published blogs or documents, encourage you to do so, because when we say we want public comment, like we want public comment, and shame on all of us for not going out to the metrics. You have another week or so since it's been extended to September 5th. Go out there, provide feedback, because that's what makes the best policy, right? Going back to the human-centered policy design, the best policy, the best FedRAMP policy, the best FedRAMP guidance is when we capture and incorporate the experiences of the FedRAMP community. That's everyone in this room, and that's everyone online. Is there
Other questions? Yeah. Ross. It takes it a second, so just keep talking.
Okay, I'll just keep talking. There we go. Now, so I work with a lot of companies that are interested in doing business with the federal government, and a lot of companies that have decided they don't want to because they want to be innovative rather than trying to meet our compliance regime. My question is, has anybody had a company go through the FedRAMP process and say, I would not have had a good system if you hadn't have been there?
Yeah, I haven't heard that specific, but that comment, but I think that I haven't had anybody. I haven't had people, companies complain, right? So we've when we introduce it to certain companies that we've dealt with, they usually they want our business, and they'll start to look at it. Some I haven't had a bad negative experience with that yet. So there may be some out there, but I haven't personally.
So if you'd like to answer Ross's question later at the networking social, feel free to grab him if you're here in the room and have a answer one way or the other. We have time for another question. Anyone? GP?
So I'm GP with Stack Armor, and also as an ADI board member. Thank you so much for coming today and spending your time with us. I think if I can just build on that question, maybe Chris, you're at an agency. Maybe could you share an example where there was some innovative new capability that was brought to you, and you were able to consume it faster because it was already FedRAMP accredited, and you were like, wow, my mission owner is able to do whatever it is that they're trying to do faster. I'm just curious on, again, FedRAMP is about bringing commercial best practice solutions to government. So I think a success story there wouldn't hurt. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we as a newer agency, we have adopted many different platforms. So just about all of our technology is on some type of a cloud-based platform. Not all of it, but most of it is going to be moved into one of our public cloud platforms. So again, this started before I got there, so I can't take full credit. But we've gone full speed ahead in moving the rest of our infrastructure into our public cloud. So I can say that as an agency that has made a big commitment to doing that, I do have a lot of confidence, both in our security posture and our ability to provide capabilities that support the mission. And I do want to actually, Drew, kind of reference something we were talking about earlier too. But and the other side of that is there are situations where the most successful situations are also where you have ongoing conversations afterward, and then that gives me a lot of comfort that the company is going to do what we need to do. So, for example, just this past May, we had a deadline to submit. We always love want to be asked for information, right? So you had post quantum cryptography inventory, right? So we had to do something like that, and then I'm home on a Friday night, and my 8 o'clock, my phone's ringing. It was a person from one of our companies saying, "Hey, I couldn't get a hold of your project manager, and I'm sorry to call you so late. I want to make sure you have all the information you need to be able to meet OMB's deadline to submit next week." So I thought, hey, that was great. This person knows what we need, what we're being asked to do, and is following through to make sure that we got what we need and are going to be compliant with what they have. So seeing that type of going the extra mile was always great. Right? So this company is very they work with us very well. So that's that kind of thing you see. And then, we didn't really get into the continuous monitoring part of automation, but that's, again, this is not just a point in time. We want to know and I talked about what our security folks wanted. They talked about the customer responsibility matrix on their application side, visibility, and knowing the status of our applications, of our platforms. When something happens, like a few weeks ago when there was a major worldwide outage, and I start getting questions in the middle of the night, hey, what's the status of everything? Being able to answer those questions is really important, right? So kind of went off on your question a little bit, but so those are things that I can do that when we have cloud-based platforms, it gives us a lot more agility to be able to respond to things.
Well, and Chris, you're right. We didn't get into the continuous monitoring, but that's really an important thing that, we talk about getting a FedRAMP ATO, like it's the end state, and it's really the beginning state of an environment that you're in to make sure that you've got the security controls you need. So quickly, other than Claire does have $7 billion that she's looking to spend on post-quantum. That's what I heard last week. Maybe I got it a little wrong. So that's why that inventory was so important. I'm going with half. But from each of you, what can industry do? And I think you've both talked a little bit about this already, but what can industry do that would be most helpful for OMB and for agencies?
I would say first and foremost, showing up, which is the fact that you all are here today, the folks online, showing up, providing feedback. Again, foot stomping that again when you have opportunities to do so through the public comment period. And 3, being that connector for agencies, if you're working with multiple agencies, might there be an opportunity to pull them, together? So those would be my 3.
And I'm going to answer from the perspective. So one of my side jobs is I'm also co-chair Small Agency CIO Council. Small agencies have a very different situation than many of our large agencies. They have a need for cloud services, but they don't have the same capacity, nor do they have the same level of expertise. So, recognizing that and understanding how can you help the small agencies, adopt this and understand these things. And so that's something I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Please join me in thanking our panelists. And now we're going to get some industry feedback.
Yep. So next, last but not least, and I think this is important, right? So we had first one where we heard from government. We've heard again, kind of the implementation from government. This last one's going to be government speaking with industry so that they can frankly hear it. So I'd like to bring up the panelists and Branko Bokan, who is coming to us from CISA. He is the chief of the Architecture and Engineering Center of Excellence. He also serves on the FSCAC, which for folks who don't know, is the Federal Cloud Security Advisory Committee. Got it. So Branko, come on up, and we should have enough microphones. If you guys want to go to the table, you're also welcome to use this. And then your panel can introduce themselves.
Sounds good. While my colleagues are getting situated, good afternoon, everyone. Federal Secure Cloud Advisory Council, Ross. I was going to thank Ross and Grant for putting this together and inviting us, but then I realized that it's us that stand between you and the reception afterwards. I was about to quote the former DC mayor, this was a setup, but thank you anyway. Thank you anyway. So while we're still getting situated, that's not exactly what he said, right? It's really exciting to be here. Thank you all. I see a lot of familiar faces. It is 2024. Can you believe it? It's almost the end of 2024. There are some buzzwords that I have to get out of the way. I haven't heard them all day. AI, machine learning, natural language processing, zero trust. What am I forgetting? Bitcoin, something else. Now that we got it out of the way, we can talk about FedRAMP and cloud security and what really matters. We have a great panel here today. I'm really excited to be here. I will join you guys in a moment. Again, a few weeks ago, just before the OMB issued the memo, we've heard from some key government stakeholders. Earlier today, we also heard from several other key government stakeholders. It's really time now to talk and get some feedback. from the industry. We have a great panel. Once again, I'm repeating myself, but again, we have representatives of some really large cloud service providers. We have representatives from companies that assist and work with those cloud service providers, as well as federal agencies, and help them get FedRAMP authorized. And I'm really excited to be here and hear from you guys. We have Alice Seifert, the head of regulated industry and public sector policy at Amazon AWS. Sean Fraser, federal chief security officer at Okta. GP, CEO and founder of Stack Armor. And Yevgeny Jervis, CEO of SafeLogic. My name is Branko Bokan. I will be the moderator for this panel today. I work for Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. Still the youngest agency, the youngest federal agency, but big mission. We really have a big mission. We have to protect the nation against all kinds of cybersecurity threats. Obviously, cloud is a big part of it. Our job is, we're very interested in protecting cloud, and especially that part of cloud that is used by civilian agency. And then my office is working with civilian executive branch agencies. For those of you who were in Las Vegas a couple of weeks ago, you may have seen me and Eric talking about the partnership with FedRAMP. We've been working with FedRAMP for many years, way before CISA was CISA, way before FedRAMP was a thing. We were working together on securing cloud and making sure that agencies can operate in safe and secure cloud environments. We are super excited about some new things and new efforts that we are working on with FedRAMP. And I just want to reiterate once again, CISA is committed to remove the barriers for entry. That is one of very important things for us. However, at no cost for cybersecurity. No compromise. Security cannot be compromised as we are removing those barriers. We do want to increase operational visibility into cloud environments, not just for CISA, and in order to support our mission to protect the agency, but also operational visibility for individual agency customers. We know that a lot of them are flying in dark right now. And there are many ways we can do that. Continuous monitoring is just one of the ways to do that. Eric was talking about some of the efforts, and we'll follow up in a bit. And finally, we are also very interested in supporting and promoting the use of secure configuration baselines for major, if not all, cloud service offerings. But with that, I will now turn it to my friends and colleagues here at the panel. Well, before we do that, I was late to this event, so I do recognize a lot of people, but I still don't know everyone. By the raise of hands, how many of you represent cloud service providers or cloud service offerings? How many of you represent the government? All right, 3PAO? 3PAO, 1, 2? Did I miss anyone? Integrators, all right. We're very strong integrators today. Anyone else? Thank you, that's very helpful. Again, this event is also for you. If you have any questions, do feel free to interrupt us. Do feel free to ask any additional questions. You're also allowed to boo and applaud. And again, we all have thick skin. That's good feedback. Applaud if you like what you hear. Boo if you don't like what you hear. We won't hold it against you. We won't be hurt.
You want to boo?
No, I'm going to sit right next to you, Sean. Well, let's start by introducing ourselves. I already did a quick introduction. Why don't we start with you, Sean? If you can tell us a little bit about your organization, and then tell us about the interactions and the work your organization is doing, obviously being a cloud service provider, with government agencies and also these third-party entities that are helping with integration.
Yeah, of course. Good to be here. Thanks, everybody. Does anyone not know who Okta is? So I don't need to tell you what we do for a living, right? So one guy in the back. Yeah, thanks, Steve. So we do identity and access management in the cloud. We are cloud only. We've been cloud only for a long time. We are actually have been on our FedRAMP journey for about 7 years. So we started in 2017 with our modern offering. I would say we learned a lot of lessons along the way. I've been there 4 years. When I got brought in to kind of lead us through our FedRAMP High and DoD IL4 authorizations at the same time. As I told Claire, not fun. I would never recommend you do that.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, good applause. So we are, between authorizations and reuse in the marketplace, we are the 4th most leveraged technology in the marketplace. So we're very proud of that. I spent a lot of my time acting as counselor and therapist for a lot of our CSP partners as we kind of go through our journey together, because it is a journey together. But I'm excited. I've always been a big fan of FedRAMP since the Matt Goodrich days, been working with the PMO for a long time. They've been a great partner of ours.
Sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Ala Seifert, and I work at Amazon Web Services. We have been huge fans of the Cloud First, Cloud Smart, and PMO organization since they began. Woohoo! Yeah. I work in public policy, and so what that means is I do advocacy on these topics, and I have been a professional FedRAMP, an advocacy professional for the FedRAMP program and on FedRAMP issues for about 6 years now, which is when I left the GSA. I too am a GSA alumna, along with prior panelists that have been up here. And we are very proud to support the program. We're very proud to offer the largest number of accredited services, and also our equities are both as a CSP that has their own services, and we support a thriving partner network of folks that develop solutions on AWS and then take them through the program. So we as a company really think through the entire ecosystem and have been doing advocacy in this space for quite a long time.
Thank you, Alan. Evgeny.
Evgeny Jervis, I represent SafeLogic. Thanks for having me here. So if you don't know SafeLogic, we're a cryptographic software company. So we provide FIPS 140 validated cryptographic solutions, now also post-quantum cryptography. So we have a lot of customers, actually many customers in this room, folks who have FIPS 140 requirements that would use our cryptographic modules. Obviously, it's a core requirement for FedRAMP. So great to be here.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm GP with StackArmor. I will tell you that I started my cloud journey about exactly 15 years ago. And, Chris, you probably don't know this, but I did set up the first cloud infrastructure for CFPB in 2010. And those were the days when, the IGs wanted to come in and walk into a cloud data center and get access to the disk. And it was very difficult to explain to them that, you don't get access to the disk. But anyway, we've come a long way. And since then, I'm the CEO and founder of StackArmor. And essentially what we've done is helped new and innovative companies come into the FedRAMP marketplace and really reduce the time and cost of really delivering a secure environment. It's a great privilege to be on this panel. All three of the panelists are friends and partners, so I don't think there's anything bad and no booze, at least from this desk. But I look forward to the conversation, and thank you very much for this panel.
Thank you. And thank you for those great introductions. I hope the mic is working now. All right. Awesome. So I will start with you, Ala. Being a veteran of FedRAMP and being involved with FedRAMP program for a very long time, given the new things that are happening, given the new memo, new team, new energy over the FedRAMP program, what are some of the areas you think that OMB and FedRAMP PMO should be looking at for their continued development and growth?
Sure. And before I begin, I meant to mention this during my intro, but a big thank you to the Alliance for Digital Innovation for convening us today. It's been a thought leader in this space and really bringing a lot of intellectual firepower to the discussion. And hopefully those of you in government, I'm seeing some nodding heads, awesome, find that ADI has been a useful, both like convener, both a useful convener and a good intellectual entity that is able to articulate the views of industry as sort of a cohesive way, because so many entities within the ADI portfolio are FedRAMPed and have equities with this program. So very excited to be here. Thank you, ADI, for convening. I would say some general top line themes, and these will be nothing y'all both haven't heard today and haven't heard generally. Those of you who are familiar with ADI's regulatory comments over the last several years are probably have probably heard this. And I would say topic number one, continuing to look at regulatory harmonization opportunities. During part one of the FedRAMP convenings, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago that ADI hosted here, there was for instance, discussion about, are there other non-NIST related security frameworks that could potentially count for FedRAMP. And what does that look like? And what are those opportunities? Something else in sort of the regulatory harmonization agenda is, are there opportunities for FedRAMP to work with other regulators and regulated entities across, whether it be critical infrastructure or other parts of the government, to really think through how to get FedRAMP to be used for more than just the IT systems at an agency, and maybe as for the agency in some of its own mission work outside across the economy, given that it's something that folks really look at. And I would say number 3, and this has happened between me being asked to be on this panel and today's panel, and that's CMMC. So CMMC, the procurement part of the program rule just dropped, I want to say last week, for public comment. And I'm still personally digesting it, but I think it's a very tactical example of a sort of a net new government program that is also a cybersecurity compliance program, but it is not, in fact, managed by a PMO inside the government. And really thinking through what does that mean? How do we make sure that there is as much reciprocity and harmonization across frameworks as possible? And how can folks that have made the investment in the FedRAMP program across government really be able to leverage those to ensure the Department of Defense and the Defense Industrial Base is able to receive as many secure cloud services as possible?
Thank you, Ala. And we'll come back to some of the. So I love the enthusiasm in the room. Remember, you're also allowed to boo, especially when I talk. We'll get back to some of the points that you raised. I think they're very interesting, and there's if we have more time to pull that thread even further. But Sean, I would like to turn to you now. You are another FedRAMP veteran. You've been around FedRAMP program as well. What are some of the challenges, in your opinion, that or opportunities, if you will, for the FedRAMP PMO in terms of continued development and growth?
So first, I want to plus one what Ala just said, which is don't give us yet another thing to do, because we already have a lot to do. I have this conversation with Jackie at DISA all the time, and DISA does a really good job of kind of leaning into the FedRAMP PMO and cross-pollinating, which is awesome for us because that cross-pollination helps us. But if that's not happening, I can tell you there's a lot of fatigue. So what I rely on the PMO and OMB to do is release some of my fatigue, because it's not just federal, which is what I'm responsible for, but I work for a global organization that's all over the world doing Protected B, doing IRAP, and doing all these other things. And if we have to go and reinvent the wheel every time we do one of these things, we're going to get to the point where we choose not to play in some of these environments just because it's too cumbersome, it's too expensive. I think the guidance is awesome. First of all, I think that, coming out and talking about this kind of shared responsibility model around multiple agency authorizations is really good. I think that a lot of the guidance coming around this has really been very helpful. I will tell you, I think there's something in the draft that talks about having the automation regime set up by December 2023. I think we're past that, so maybe that needs to be updated. No, is it? So something said 2023 in there, but maybe it was a typo. But I'm looking forward to having something to plug into to make it easier, because I think one of the challenges that I've had inside of Okta, and it's pretty much everywhere, is that when I first started, it was looked at as a compliance regime. So compliance kind of ran this thing. The engineers would come to compliance and go, what am I allowed to do? And that's really not the right approach to this. The approach to this is that engineers should be kind of shifting left on security. We build the right security things, and then give us an automated way to report that somewhere. Help me get to like an 80% POAM in some kind of automated fashion. And then the last 20% can be the human being part. Eric talked about what we can automate. Some of this we can automate, but we can't automate the human part of it. So 80%, we get there in automation. Great, help me with that. Build the POAM, give it to the humans for adjudication. Let the humans kind of put their spin on it, do risk adjustments, do all the things they need to do. And oh, by the way, I have to do this 3 times every year. I've got IL4, I've got FedRAMP High, I've got FedRAMP Moderate. We try to find economies. As I mentioned, we did the audit for IL4 and FedRAMP High at the same time. And every year we do these audits at the same time. So it's like 80% the same, and then 20% differences we kind of flesh out. But we're coming out, and I'm glad Cole Fire is here, because Cole Fire is my best friend over the last 4 weeks. But we're coming right out of our FedRAMP High deal, IL4 audit, right into our FedRAMP Moderate audit. Literally, there is no rest for the teams at all. Bless you. We come right out of this thing, we take like a 2-day break, and then the following Monday, we're going right back into it, FedRAMP Moderate. So help me alleviate some fatigue. A lot of the placeholders in the guidance are really great to do that. Obviously, the devil's in the details. Let us all help you figure out what those details are.
we'll get back to that. I really want to know more about automation and continue this discussion. But before we get back to you, I want to give an opportunity to GP and Yevgeny. Again, from your perspective, you work with both CSPs, you work with agencies, you help them get into compliance. What are some of the critical risks that you see and you think that both FedRAMP, PMO, and OMB should be aware moving forward?
Evgeny is being very nice. Thank you. I think it's important. I think as we have seen, as we've seen the sort of scaling of the program, right? So the program was born, well over a decade ago. So now with the tag, the FedRAMP board, and the multi-agency ATOs, I think one of the biggest things that we continue to feel is the need to go in and incent, advise, and educate agencies on the need to go in and their role in creating a thriving FedRAMP marketplace. Because the bottom line is no sponsorships means that the market will not grow, and so new innovative technologies will not come into the market. So I think our ask would be to go in. I mean, we've seen for the last 12 months a very significant drop-off in sponsorships. And so I think as the agencies, get to hear the, beautiful work being done by the FedRAMP PMO, I think educating agencies, and also I think bringing out some of the success stories. I have a personal calculator that I use, and based on my back of the envelope calculations, FedRAMP has resulted in about $500 million a year in cost avoidance, which otherwise the taxpayer would be paying for. I think it's important to go in and bring those stories out so that more funding can be provided to this program and we can incent more agencies to lean in. So I think that would be my top recommendation.
Thank you, JP. Yevgeny?
Wow. No booze yet.
You can do better than that.
So, we have a lot of FedRAMP experts here. So I'm not a FedRAMP expert. So I'm kind of, focusing in the world of cryptography. So I'll kind of take it from that angle, right? And there's a lot of changes going on in the world of cryptography. So I'm sure you're familiar, kind of the migration from FIPS 140-2 to FIPS 140-3, which has been a difficult one for many organizations, right? Things have been a little slow moving through the queues through NIST. We live kind of that every day, working with people on that. But right now, there is another one, right? So if you think about it, we've been dealing with -2 to -3 tsunami of change in cryptography. But last week, I had the privilege, Claire, thank you for having me at the White House last week, for the announcement of the PQC standards by NIST. So kudos to NIST, right? I mean, 7+ years of effort, very transparent process, global contributions, started with 80+ algorithms, standardized 3. So some of the brightest, mathematicians, cryptographers in the world really went, over 5 years working on all this, right? So, but now we've got the standards, right? But, the standards is just one thing, for the government agencies to adopt those algorithms, we need to get the implementations through the FIPS process, because a lot of the issues that you can think about cryptography that you've heard about actually haven't been the algorithms being broken. A lot of it actually has been implementations being poor or not up to code, right? So NIST and FIPS is critical for us to make sure that the cryptography is not somebody just woke up in the basement one day, coded something up, and called it cryptography. We need people to take a look at it in a rigorous process, which is what NIST Cryptographic Module Validation Program is. The concern that I have, just getting back to risks, the program has already been sort of at capacity with the -2 to -3 migration. And now we have another tsunami of change with post-quantum cryptography needing to validate all those modules. And by the way, there is already things that are coming right behind it with entropy validation around sources of randomness, because you can have good algorithms, you can have good implementations, but if your keys are not random enough, that's a problem too. So there's going to be more transitions. So making sure that this program has sufficient resources and funding to function, because it really is a key thing. And thank you. Yeah. And actually, just again, kudos to ADI, because we've all kind of been working on that. And I think it's a very key work to make sure that that organization gets the proper, resources that they need. Because the reality is, it's a key priority right now for, our government through, executive orders, through the legislation that got passed in 22 to migrate to quantum. Unless we get that program, the throughput going properly, that could be at risk. So that would be mine.
Thank you. And I would like actually to stay with that topic of the cryptography. And GP, you mentioned it as we were exchanging emails earlier today and getting ready for this panel. You highlighted, you stressed, we really need to talk about positive things as well. And I mean, again, our goal here is not to sound negative. We really want to talk and discuss and bring out challenges. So there is some good news when it comes to cryptography. Just a few weeks ago, we've seen a new guidance on cryptographic module validation. So Evgeny, back to you. If you could frame that problem for us and help, again, cryptography is not easy to understand. It's one of those topics that very few people in the world really understand how it works, and we all use it every day. If you could really spend a few minutes, frame the problem, and explain to us what this new guidance means. It gives CSPs a lot of flexibility to do new things and arguably improve security of those offerings. And also tell us, do you think if this is a long-term solution, and if not, what would be your view, your recommendation for a long-term solution when it comes to, again, cryptographic module validation?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. I come from the world of software security, so before I came to SafeLogic about 2.5 years ago, I spent, 20 years in software security. So my approach has always been sort of risk management and risk-based. And I always thought that, compliance should be really a byproduct of good security and risk management, right? So for me, it's very important not to have something that creates friction between security and compliance, right? And so in the world of cryptography, right, there's this problem that exists. The world right now in software development is moving fast, right? Speed of DevSecOps, and so are the bad guys, right? So compliance right now, as it comes to cryptography, it doesn't move, as fast, because there's a process that is more waterfallish process than it is an agile and sort of process. So there's fundamental misalignment of the speed with which those two wheels are kind of turning, right? And so where that would really manifest, and I'm sure you all have encountered that, is, it takes right now over 2 years to get a new module validated, right? And the module has a security boundary around it. And if there's any change within the security boundary, like change one line of code, it has to go through a revalidation process. That takes months. So what happens when there is a CVE, a security vulnerability? If it's outside of that security boundary, no problem. You fix it, the module is still compliant, you didn't change anything in the boundary, you can, take it in production. But what if that issue happens to be within the security boundary? Then technically you touch anything in there, that module is no longer validated, right? And so then, there's a question, do I apply something that's has the security patches, but technically is now out of validation, has to go through the process, or do I stay with something that's, fully compliant but has the issue, right? As a security practitioner, there's a very clear answer to that question. For me, it's always been, of course you put, however, as a vendor, like we cannot make this decision for our customers because people may have different trade-off between their compliance and risk management. So essentially we'd make both versions available to them and say, you do what you want to do. So the latest, I think, changes that are proposed in FedRAMP, I actually was very excited to see them. I actually still need to provide a little bit of commentary on that too, some input, but I think that's great because I think, at least my reading was, it takes some of this tension away. It says that, yes, you update and then you get back to, the validated baseline. So I think that's exactly the right thing. Where I worry about it and where I think we need to have some guardrails, I wouldn't want people to use that as an excuse to not have a good strategy to stay with validated modules, right? So you need to have a good plan and strategy for that. If with having that strategy, you happen to fall out of compliance because some CVE came out that was not anticipated, fine, right? There's a process for that. But sort of part of my concern that I kind of want to make sure does not happen is that just folks look at that and like, well, that means I can just use unvalidated cryptography because honestly, there's a good reason why we have standards for cryptography. Like I equate like cryptography to kind of like, it's everywhere, right? It's foundational to digital privacy and trust. I kind of analogy I use is like water pipes in your house, right? When water pipes don't leak, nobody cares about the water pipes. When water pipes start to leak, there's no water, it's a big problem, right? So right now with PQC, we have water pipes are beginning to leak across the whole digital ecosystem. So we need to put new pipes in. But what's important is, just like in plumbing, there's code. You don't want to put plumbing fixtures that are not up to code. So FIPS 140 is really that code. So it's important. So I think the effort that are underway right now, I think is to just kind of reconcile those things. So I absolutely think it's the right thing to do.
I want to get back to what GP was saying earlier about this being a win, one step up, one level up, but being a win, some of the new guidance coming out for the cryptography. And this ties into what Ross was talking about earlier. I think the question you were asking was, is anyone kind of stand up and go, is FedRAMP a success? Does it make my organization better and stronger and faster? And I will give you just a very short story about how it is absolutely a success. And Claire talked about how the first three things she heard when she came into the office was FedRAMP problem, FedRAMP problem, FedRAMP problem. No one would give a shit if FedRAMP wasn't successful. But the reason they came to you is because it has been successful and they're passionate about changing and creating a better FedRAMP process. When I first started Okta, I was probably the most hated person at Okta because I would meet with all the engineering teams and tell them all the things that they weren't doing right. And they'd go to compliance. Compliance would say, can I do this? Can I do that? And I would say, but that's not what we should be doing. What we should be doing is thinking about security more holistically. I actually made these little cheesy challenge coins that said, what's good for Fed is good for Okta. And I gave it to all the engineers so that they knew that the federal process was actually helping them become more secure. So by the time they got to compliance, compliance just did the audit. Because that's what compliance is there to do. Compliance is not there to tell engineering what to do, it's to validate that you did the right things. So that's a win. I think that, Ross, that's what you were asking is, does it up-level security in an organization? Absolutely it does.
And thank you, Sean, and thank you. I'll get to Ali in a second. Thank you, Ross, for that question. I actually wrote it down. I wanted to repeat Ross's question and put a different spin. And you just answered it, and thank you again. Ala, you and I were in a meeting a few weeks ago, and I know you're also very passionate about this topic. So I definitely want to give you an opportunity to follow up on this question.
Sure. So the other thing about cryptographic module validation is it is not done at GSA. It is a key part of the ecosystem, but it is happening over Department of Commerce and NIST. And one of the things that ADI has been doing advocacy around for many years, as has many of us in industry, is we're trying to make sure that that organization has funding. I think ADI for many years, and many of you in this room have been partners in doing advocacy around making sure the FedRAMP PMO has the requisite amount of funding it needs, that the ITOR over at OMB as a key fund has the relevant money that it needs to do its job. And a big thank you in the spirit of giving shout outs to just like people sitting here in the room. Sorry for people online, but Mr. Matthew Cornelius, former HISGAC staffers in the room, and did a tremendous amount of work to make sure that both the FedRAMP PMO and the ITOR got plussed up during a moment in the American Rescue Plan Act conversations of 2021 of spring 21, where it looked like there was going to be some funding flexibility and a supplemental, and they were able to get that cash. But for cryptographic module validation, that's an annual appropriations process, and it's a slog, and it can be and does require a consistent set of advocacy from those of us in industry and from our partners in government to make sure that that program receives the relevant or the requisite amount of funding that it really needs year over year over year to handle the forthcoming influx of modules that are going to have to be validated. Like it is a grind, and we have to be in the game and really pursuing this consistently in the same way that many of us here pursue FedRAMP funding consistently as a policy advocacy area.
Thank you. And I do encourage my fellow panelists also to follow up, but also you guys in the audience, feel free to raise your hand, feel free to ask questions, feel free to provide your comment and your feedbacks. We really want to hear from you. GP, I will give you a quick opportunity, again, going back to success stories. Is there anything else? Are there any additional success stories that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, I think I would. I think, just listening to Sean and I think Evgeny, and in the interest of, sticking my neck out and seeing how many boos I collect, I would argue, compliance is very much a maligned word in my mind. Really, I mean, as people, Sean said, at the end of the day, compliance is security at scale. right? I mean, if you're talking about, a system that goes in and spends $80 billion, you're not just talking about trying to find out a way to secure one company or two companies. You're talking about trying to secure a complete system with hundreds and, thousands of companies. Compliance, when done right, it goes in and delivers the results exactly as Sean said. And so what I would further say is, I feel that the last 10 years of investment of FedRAMP have delivered a secure digital highway, not very different from the Eisenhower interstate system. And so even sticking my neck out further, I would go in and argue that the transition to PQC compliant crypto for organizations that have adopted FedRAMP compliant CSPs will be much faster than if they have, all these disparate spread out systems. So the bottom line is the crucial plumbing and the muscle and the expertise now exists, where as the government needs to react faster to threats and risks, we have the ability to do so. So I just feel very bullish about the work that FedRAMP is doing going forward.
I think the one thing I'll add to this, and I think this is super important, and I see this as a major positive after looking at FedRAMP for 10 years and FISMA stuff before that, and is just the collaboration. I mean, we've got OMB, we've got GSA, we got CISA. Everyone's kind of sitting here and participating at the same level and talking about the same things. A good example of that was when the NVD database got dropped on the floor a few months ago, right? It was like, oh, who's not it, not going to pick up the NVD. And someone, CISA's like, yeah, we're going to pick this up. We're going to figure out how to fund this. We'll figure out how to do this because it's important. All of us rely on that. We plug into that as part of our kind of security regime every single day. And for that to go away and for someone not to own that would be kind of critical for us. I think even more critical for the downstream partners we have. They're doing the scans and doing all those kind of adjudication things. So I think just this level of collaboration is awesome.
And Sean, you can keep your mic on. My next question goes back to you, but also for other fellow panelists as well. Again, being at CISA for many years, probably number one complaint that we hear is inadequacy of paper and PDF-based assessments and processes and works, and not just in FedRAMP, but in general. We've heard from Eric that the GRC tool is almost ready. It's being configured. So we're talking a lot about automation. This is one of our priorities for us at CISA. But are the service providers ready to automate? And what are the obstacles, in your opinion?
I would love to say that we are, but we're probably not. We're probably not ready to automate yet. I mean, we've just over the last 3 years been figuring out our processes and getting full scan coverage and full inventories. And I would say we haven't gotten that right yet. We're still not perfect. But it's early enough in the process that we have to have the conversation. We have to know what the inputs are. So we're planning. So we're always thinking about because I don't want to build something and then have something come in that I got to plug into that's completely orthogonal to what I built because that's expensive. So during the planning process, I need to know what the inputs, the APIs, whatever's going to be out there to be able to do. What is this GRC tool going to look like? How does my GRC and bone scan team interface with this? So we can plan for it because we are in that phase where we're starting to think about how we're going to plan for it, just to, again, alleviate that stress and that fatigue that we got on having manual processes for all these different things. So, yeah.
Before I ask GP and Evgeny for their perspective from the other side, Alec, did you have anything to add on this topic?
No, I mean, sorry, yes, I do. The automation with OSCAL will be extremely important. And I do think industry is hungry and will continue to be, just to echo all of Sean's points around what is the specifics about what is expected. Again, at AWS, we're really thinking about things at scale. We are a very big stakeholder in this ecosystem. We care a lot. I mean, you heard my colleague's question earlier about like risk trigger threshold, right? Like when we as Amazon look at things, we're really looking at things at scale and we really want to be compliant. We are down this road. We are making plans. We are moving out on some internal work streams on this. And we're going to really need to know where this fits, what you all need, and how you want to ingest it from us in industry. And
GP and Evgeny, are there any specific challenges or issues that you see from your side when it comes to automation?
Well, I think automation is definitely key. I mean, again, going back to, NIST and CVP program, for instance, I think they're doing a great job introducing more automation. So talking about PDF documents, right? Each cryptographic module comes with a very long PDF document that is a security policy, right? And right now, vendor put us together, it works with the lab to put it together, then it goes to NIST, and then there's a lot of manual review and back and forth. So right now, there's a new process actually to automate that whole thing such that it can be then more easily just reviewed by computers versus humans. So with maybe some spot checks. So I think that's definitely a key initiative that should hopefully reduce some of the queue times.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, automation is of course important and, it always has been. I think from our perspective, what's really interesting is the combination of OSCAL with AI. And I think now finally, I think somebody mentioned digital authorizations. I think these two things coming together, I think will allow us to go in and provide the results of automation, right? So I think, the ability to go in, and I know my friends at Google, where they are, Josh, he and others are working on some interesting things on trying to go in and find a way to quickly leverage, these digital artifacts and provide the insight so that, people can make decisions faster. So I think it's not just OSCAL for OSCAL's sake or automation for automation's sake. I think what's more interesting to us is the ability to go in and take away some of the toil that, my friends at AWS use a lot and allow us to go in and do things better, faster, and deliver the insights necessary. So that's why we're very bullish about OSCAL.
And it's not just the PDFs and the papers and all this stuff, but we spend so much time in audits and interviews where I've got engineers. These are expensive resources that build things for a living, and they're not building things. They're sitting on calls and they're doing evidence collection. They're doing all these different things that take away the time where they should be innovating for our company to build new products and to build new features and to fix things that they got going on. So it's a lot more than just fixing the paper thing. It's just kind of fixing the whole process that makes it just so automated that on my end, we got a lot of work to do to automate our pieces so that evidence can be collected naturally through an automation process. But we got to plug into something to deliver that data.
We have about 10 minutes left. I have one question that I really want to ask everyone. But before I do that, again, I want to remind my fellow panelists here, if there are any questions you want to ask each other, don't be shy. Please, I'm sure that you have some great questions and things that you would like to say. And once again, for everyone in the audience, and I don't know if we are watching online, if we have an opportunity to get feedback from those who are watching us online and get questions from them. But definitely you in the room, if you have questions, raise your hand and we'll make sure to give you some time. But back to the panel, and I don't have anyone in particular in mind, so whoever wants to go first, there is this thing working for cybersecurity agency, obviously cybersecurity being our primary concern. This whole idea of building and maintaining separate dedicated cloud, GovCloud offering. And there are a lot of arguments, both pro and con in terms of cybersecurity, in terms of everything else. But I think most of us agree that we are losing that battle by building, and again, this is now, I'm giving you my opinion, and that's not what I want. I want to hear from you. The new memo does encourage the share or use of shared infrastructure, shared commercial infrastructure. And the new memo actually encourages both providers and agencies not to go GovCloud route, but to use what's available mainstream commercial offerings. Is this something that is easier said than done? And what are the challenges for CSPs?
I have opinions. I think that, if we were based only in the US, that would be easy to do. It would be really easy. And I, in spirit and on paper, I completely agree that there should be one secure system that you deliver. And my engineers would love that because they don't want to go build different things and have different environments. But the reality is that, when we built out our FedRAMP High and IL4 environment, we have different eligibility requirements for access and for people who can come in and touch the systems and do all these different things. We're a global company. We have a pretty big footprint in India for developers. They can't come in and touch that environment. So there's a natural need for separation that just exists. Now, can we get 80% of it? Like when you write the code, we do a lot of that, where a lot of the code that gets pushed out from our kind of monolith process goes out to the different places, and the developers don't know exactly where it's going, and it just kind of goes everywhere. So we try to do as much repeat of process and things as we can. But for those environments, there is just really no possible way where we could just have one where government and non-government just all lives.
And actually, there's a reason for that, right? And that reason is the security controls themselves. Like, it is one thing for an OMB memo to come out and say, like, yeah, the North Star is commercial. You don't have to build separate things. But until the security control frameworks are adjusted, we're held to a different standard, which is, I think, where you were going. Like, there's a spreadsheet, you're audited against it, you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
But I love that Google did it, right? I mean, you guys have one platform, which makes it a lot easier for us, but unfortunately for us, it's hard.
I think the perspective I would go in and provide, I think ultimately, I'm a big believer that, ultimately innovation and technology drives those kind of decisions, right? I mean, the decisions about, Gov Cloud and, separate enclaves were made, maybe 10 years ago. Technology has changed and evolved. So I just believe that, as I think our friends at Google have shown, as technology evolves, right, I think the solutions will evolve. But I think, it being too prescriptive from the government side, I don't know if that's necessarily always helpful, right? I'll make the case. I think all of us had a really interesting wake-up call with the CrowdStrike example. It's just as a educational point. Is it good for everything to be at the same place and be hyper-connected? I think that's a question I think that all of us have to look at and understand truly the risk profile. And so I think in my mind, I think let industry innovate and let competition prevail, and let the best solutions go in and present themselves. That would probably a market-based view is what I would.
And I remember I asked, again, last time I saw GP was actually at Google's campus like a year or two ago, talking to Google about these kinds of things. I remember asking some architect that was there about why they did this and why they combined the things and their authorizations. And he said, the way we're built, it just worked better that way. We actually could not separate these things out. So again, it kind of depends on your stack as well. And for us, it would be a lot harder to do the opposite.
I think we have a question from the audience. And would you mind introducing yourself, sir?
Hi, I'm Ross Nodorf. I'm with the Alliance for Digital Innovation. But I do have a question following up on what you guys are talking about. You guys are talking about one of the interesting things that the FedRAMP memo says is we're going to look at, and we talked about this earlier, we're going to look at other standards that are out there, whether it's SOC 2, whether it's anything else that we can look across the compliance framework. So my question is two parts. One, do you think that given that every agency owning its own risk, using the NIST catalogs as controls, do you find that there is a significant amount of overlap between what the requirements are at the various agencies and what you're seeing in other international public sector spaces? What does that look like? So I'll start there and then I have a follow-up.
I have opinions, but I always have opinions, so start with somebody else.
Well, again, from a cryptography perspective, I don't feel there's a lot of overlap because most of these things found, basically point back to FIPS 140 in some shape or form. So, if you do that, you're going to be good, at least, US and Canada. Now, what's happening internationally, that's a different story. I mean, I was out in Brussels earlier this year. I was in Brussels for the kind of the Cybersecurity Act, and there was they talked a lot about the PQC standards, and I was a little bit concerned that there was, a lot of, I guess, desire to sort of almost like reinvent the wheel versus to sort of adapt and align with what NIST has been doing for over 7 years. And I think there was a little bit of either it's like not invented here, or we got, our own requirements, or, maybe we have concerns about certain agencies and how much they had, involved in the process or whatnot. But that can be a little bit problematic because I can kind of see that, we have customers who, have FIPS 140 validation and they met, the common criteria requirement, but they go to certain countries in Europe and they're like, what's your evidence? It's almost, you have to start from first principles. Like, well, my evidence is, I got my certification, I've got through the process with NIST, and they're like, well, we got our own process. The thing is, they don't necessarily even have their own process sometimes, but they feel like they kind of got to do their own thing. So that's a bit of a concern. But in the US, like in Canada, like I feel like we, at least for cryptography, we're sort of pointing to the same thing. So I don't see necessarily a lot of
Crypto's a little different because when you do the CMVP cert, you got the little Canadian flag and you got the little US flag. So you guys have a little bit of easier time. So my answer to that question is, yes, there's obviously overlap. So when we talk to these, they're all looking at it, 53 controls, the same NIST control, volumes that they're looking at. It's all the same things. But when we went and did IRAP, I mean, you have kind of regionality and sovereignty considerations about access. So you got to be in Australia. We're now talking to Protected B, and now, we ask the Canadians, it's, they always bring me in because I'm the federal guy. It's like, well, federal stuff, and it's all the same. It's not all the same. But I always get on the calls with folks, and I ask the questions like, well, what are your access requirements? Does it need to be Canadian citizen on Canadian soil? And they're like, yeah, maybe. They don't know, right? I mean, they kind of come back and say, okay, well, yeah, maybe not, but that affects us when it comes to hiring, because that means we got to hire people that kind of are in country to do all these different things. We had to do that for IRAP. So, and the longest poll or the biggest poll, the most expensive thing is not the things that you share in common. It tends to be the things that they have that are differences, which again, that's that access and it's modalities and it's the hiring and all that other stuff.
So that is the perfect setup to the second part of the question, which is, so given that there is this remit now out there to look at other standards, what would you like to see? Is it a commercial standard? Like, what if you could pick the order, which ones would you like the FedRAMP PMO or whoever is leading that charge to look at for reciprocity's sake? What would be the most value add?
And if I may, before you answer that question, because that was my question, Ross, and I just want to add the third part to that question. In your opinion, do you think that NIST and US federal standards, including controls, are still the gold standard? Or are there better frameworks out there?
I thought I was going to answer that question.
So there's someone so much smarter than me at Amazon who can answer the first part. But I will say, even in the US, there are still folks thinking about IT systems in a non-cloud native way, where even the 53 controls would be a benefit. And so I would actually flip that a little slightly and to the regulatory harmonization issue I mentioned earlier. I would love more folks in non-federal IT to think about the FedRAMP standards and the accreditation from the program as sufficient elsewhere. It would be great because these are cloud native controls. Like, whatever you feel about them, at least we've got them, you all in the room, right? Like, it is a successful program. And you can't say that about lots of other entities, nor can you say it about many of the ways other auditors and other regulated spaces, just something I think about as well in my role, think about IT, which is they think about it as on premises. They want to touch stuff. They want to see your filing cabinet for clinical trials or what have you. And I think it would be really great if FedRAMP itself was more leveraged even across the US in lots of other regulated spaces.
So I'm a huge fan of reciprocity, obviously, because I look at economies and think how these things work. But I think we probably need to get our own house in order before we start talking about Canadian reciprocity and German reciprocity, because right now, even between DoD and non-DoD, I only have reciprocity at a certain level. So until I get higher reciprocity there, then I'd love to be able to make some reciprocity go to Canada and Germany and all these other places we want to sell product to.
Can I just add something to it, Branko, if I may? I think, Ross, to answer your question, I think to me, it's less about the controls, because ultimately, I think if you sort of put them side by side, they'll probably say the same thing. But I think something that Ala said is very important. It's the FedRAMP program itself and the rigorousness of its continuous monitoring program that I think has really made it the gold standard. So I think if you do want to look at reciprocity and say, okay, what else can I look at? I would go and say, look at and find the program that truly means continuous monitoring means continuous monitoring. And if I have a high vulnerability, I'm going to fix it in 30 days. Otherwise, you're going to get shut down, right? So I think that too is more important. And I think one of the last things you would want to do is, unravel the trust in commercial cloud technologies for public sector by things going wrong. I think that's the balance you got to strike.
Yeah, if I had a time machine, I'd go back in time before FedRAMP got invented, and I would create a NATO for cybersecurity. And I would do it like we did in IAP. I told Claire earlier, I do it like we did in IAP and common criteria back in the day where we had some kind of global standard where we could all inherit from and it would all be kumbaya and all the countries could just do that thing. And they would add their special layer on top of it. But unfortunately, I've got no time machine.
We are at time. Ross, I know you wanted to say something. I'll give you 30 seconds. I don't know if it's a question or feedback. Please be quick.
My question is the differential cost of the FedRAMP, of the federal infrastructures, right, that FedRAMP does, is it worth the cost?
Ask me in 18 months. No, it actually has been worth the cost. You know, it was an investment. When I first got here, I don't think we were making the right investments around the federal program, and we had to make some serious investments. And a lot of that, again, was around kind of access and eligibility and having people in region to be able to do all these different things. But yes, you know, if you ask me, are we making money? We're making money.
So no additional feedback. We are not going to do closing state. Okay, 30 seconds. We have 30 seconds for one more question.
7,000 employees.
So what happens when a company is supposed to be innovative? Is at one, you're looking at less than 10 billion.
Yeah.
Look at lack of reciprocity and the capabilities to go in.
Yeah. So what do you? Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, you know, the question is around, you know, barrier to entry, getting in as a small organization and the cost that it is to do this. And I will say that is definitely a concern. And I would think that, you know, Okta kind of made that decision back in 2017 when they did their first FedRAMP thing, is that we're just going to do this in the areas where we have it. We're not going to hire dedicated people. We're just going to do it in existing GRC and existing vol management, existing engineering. And that's how you kind of have to start. But when you kind of get to the higher assurance levels, you can't do that anymore. So you have to kind of make the investment. So hopefully the revenue and the investments kind of work hand in hand, but I'm not sure it works that way for everybody.
I can provide a perspective. I mean, we have a customer in California. They're just 5 people, and they have a FedRAMP high, FedRAMP moderate IL4 environment where they're protecting data of, you know, service members. So I don't think it's just, I think in my mind, that's a little bit of a myth that, you know, it's only, you know, a multi-billion-dollar corporation that can do it. I mean, there are plenty of successful examples of smaller organizations as literally as small as 5 that have successfully done it. So I just want to, you know, offer that perspective.
But there are other barriers in the program. I will just say, like, the program nevertheless has the barrier with respect to sponsorship. And that's still real, and that is still, that's right. And I will, that's right. And we're all booing internally, clapping externally. And like kudos to the PMO for thinking about that and possibly thinking about how it is that the PMO can change that paradigm. I will just take it all the way back to resourcing. Like I said, I want the PMO to have enough money to walk and chew gum at the same time, and to potentially overcome the barrier about needing a sponsor before you go through the program, and also to do their existing work and also scale the program itself. Like I want a yes and future, and hopefully that not only will the compliance part and the security part be doable, but so will the programmatic need to get sponsorship.
So again, next time we need more time, Ross. If we can start early in the morning and have a full day for this discussion, I would really appreciate that. We are not going to do closing statements. However, I do have one final question for everyone, and please limit your answer to 1 minute. And you don't have to answer it if you don't want to. There's a caveat to this question. You're not allowed to use AI, ML, NLP, zero trust, all the buzzwords.
You're the only one that said it.
I did. I got it out of got him out of the way, right? I'm surprised that no one mentioned those terms all day. What do you see as the biggest challenge for FedRAMP and cloud security in the next 5 years? Whether that's emerging threats, whether that's something else. Think next 5 years, the biggest challenge for FedRAMP program and or cloud security in general. In less than 1 minute.
I'm going to say one word: agility. That's the biggest challenge.
Agility.
Scale.
You're standing between me and a beer, my friend. One word.
Competing priorities.
Competing priorities.
2 words.
Since Allah
There's a
stole
dash.
mine, scale, I'll use trust. I think FedRAMP's biggest challenge will be to maintain the trust in the program as we scale and do more.
Thank you. I really thank you so much to my fellow panelists. Thank you for to all of you in the audience for all the questions. I'm sorry that we ran out of time. And finally, thank you to ADI for hosting this event together. Ross, you have the final word.
I want you to say real quick the FSCAC, and because since you sit on there, are there other fora for companies to continue to have these conversations?
Right, Federal Secure Cloud Advisory Council. Look it up. That's the first thing that comes up if you Google FSCAC. I see some of my fellow colleagues from that committee or council, I think. So yeah, Google us, and that's also an opportunity, especially for those of you from industry to.
I'm still waiting for my invite, so you send me an invite.
We'll talk. Thank you all.
Thank you, guys. All right, so thank you to the folks that are here. I want to bring up real quick our board chair, Stephen Kovac, to say closing remarks, but I know people have to leave, so thank you guys very much. Thank you to the panel. Broncos was great. It was very engaged, especially in the late afternoon. So thank you guys very much. Steve?
I'll keep it short so I don't have to run out. I think I know everybody here. I look out here over the last 13 years in FedRAMP. So thank you all, and thank you to the FedRAMP people and all the presenters today for coming in and having this session with us. Two things you should know. Today, Canada released, if you look it up, CCCS Canada released a documentation saying it will accept US FedRAMP controls against your commercial cloud. And all you gotta do is provide a gap analysis for your ITSWG. So it's an interesting thing. It's our articles out there today under CCCS, triple CS in Canada. Secondly, I will say from the ADI standpoint, thank you all. We're very blessed that you're here. We appreciate it. If you're not a member, please join. From the days of Matt, that's a great job to what Ross has continued to grow. I mean, we have become a very strong, loud voice here. And the more of you that join the voice, the more change we can create. And as you see this wonderful change, as all, I've been around FedRAMP since the beginning, since the BPA days. And I've seen it all. And what Eric and the team have done is just really transform. And this is going to really change the game. And eliminating things like SCRs, and not eliminating them, but modifying the process. I thank you guys for all the hard work and the sleepless nights for doing that. But again, from ADI, we appreciate it. And myself, from Zscaler, multiple certifications at FedRAMP, which now are going to be merged into just a couple, which is kind of nice, make it a little bit easier on us. And last but not least, I'm going to tell you a quick story before you leave. Two seconds. November of 2019, 2020, SolarWinds was hitting. We had seen something happening in a certain agency, very weird. And we were up all night Thanksgiving evening diagnosing what this issue was. And months later, we figured out what SolarWinds was. We had our FedRAMP certification done. We decided to put the FedRAMP controls against our commercial cloud and activate the controls, especially around how we bring in code and the code review parts of FedRAMP. And the other day, Jay Chaudhry at RSA, wasn't the other day, a few weeks, he said, if it wasn't for the FedRAMP controls, SolarWinds would have hit Zscaler. Because we implemented the FedRAMP controls, we were not touched. If that is not a testimony of what FedRAMP could have done, and you imagine the thousands and tens and 100,000 customers we have at this point could have been affected, and that would have spread across all of us. So that's the value they bring. We love it. We love you guys from ADI. Join ADI if you're not part of it. Thank you for coming today. And oh yeah, there's booze behind us. Line will be right behind me. Thank you.